Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Submission Radio. I'm Dennis Shkaradov and I'm here with Kasper Rozalowski. It's April 19th and we have a huge show for you.
Yeah, it's going to be a big one today. We're doing a triple today. We've got three guests on. We've got Nate Marquardt. He recently had a fight announced, so we're going to be chatting to him about his fight, his past, and everything as far as his UFC standings and career at the moment. Then we've got another big one. We've got Mike Winkeljohn, obviously coming from the Jackson's Winkeljohn camp. I'm going to be talking to him about Jon Jones, Holly Holm, Travis Browne. Plenty of fights coming up. And of course, as always, we've got Mr. Duane Finley coming on from Bleacher Report to chat about all the latest. What are some of the things we're going to be chatting about today, Dennis?
Well, there's a lot of topics to talk about. You know, the TUF Nations Finale, the Verdum, Travis Browne fight. There's going to be some other topics, including Jake Shields. So a lot of stuff to talk about. Now, guys, as always, we're available on Stitcher. We're available on TuneIn Radio and iTunes. So you make sure that if you don't have the time to listen to this episode now, pop on your app, put it on your car, put it on your phone, and listen to the show all the way through. You know, it's nice and simple. You don't have to sit in front of your computer on YouTube all day.
Yeah, and for anyone who has already subscribed to us on YouTube, we thank you and appreciate your subscription. But we do have a new YouTube channel. It is the end little tag is Submission Radio AU. So it's now without the S. So check out our new channel, all our new videos and all our exclusive footage, such as the first fight series and all this other stuff that we've got coming up. It's all going to be on the brand new channel. So Submission Radio AU, that's the new channel. Head over, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and it is our aim to have as much content as possible over there. So
That's right. That's right, guys. And if you are watching on YouTube right now, just take a look down into the comment section. We have the times for when each interview is starting. So if you are low on time and you do want to listen to it on your computer, we do have Mike Winkeljohn on, we have Nate Marquardt on, and we have the amazing Duane Finley from Bleacher Report. That's right. Sorry about that. From Bleacher Report on. So you can catch all that in parts. Just have a look down at the bottom to see what times each interview starts.
Absolutely, guys. Yeah, like we said, follow us at Twitter, Submission Radio Oz. And without further ado, I think it's time to kick it off. There's a lot to talk about. Time for our first guest. You can follow him at Duane Finley MMA. He writes for Bleacher Report. He's got a lot of good articles. And of course, as always, check out his Fighting Life live blog. It's absolutely packed with juicy content. None other than Duane Finley. Duane, welcome to the show again.
Hey, it feels good to be back. I feel like I should get I should be put in my application for Australian citizenship.
I was just going to say,
being back on your show.
Honorary citizen, absolutely, and we'd love to have you anytime in the country.
It's a part of the Australian citizenship test anyway, being a part of our show. So I think that's why we get so many fighters coming in from Brazil and stuff on our show.
Yeah, I mean, in the States, we get a lot of you can always marry down to get your papers, and so maybe I don't know how those things work internationally, but Kyle Noki was trying to tell me, trying to convince me on this Vegemite thing. And and it's the lines are kind of blurred. People either love it or hate it. So yeah, I figure if I get some Vegemite in me, I'll be Australian by Tuesday.
Hey, we like you, Duane. If you needed to marry us to stay in the country, we'd be fine with that. but it's
perfect, man.
It's a 2-in-1 package. You're marrying both of us, not just the one.
Hey, that's how I work, man. I'm a multitasker. So that's the way I prefer it, It'd be more MMA than anybody can handle.
More bang for the buck. But as far as what's been happening recently, obviously just the other day we had the TUF Nation finale. Lots and lots to talk about. So I figure we're going to break down the fights, probably started from the bottom of the card. First fight on the main card was the Poirier Akira Kurosani fight. What were your thoughts on that one, Duane?
Well, I actually thought it was going in. I thought it was kind of a curious pairing, especially for Dustin Poirier. Dustin's right up there, right outside the top 5 in a really heated featherweight division. And the way things kind of shook out, there just weren't any matchups there for him. So he could have either kind of stayed and wait to see how things played out, but he decided to keep working. And I thought, anytime you have a fight that's a high risk, low reward, like fighting somebody like Akira Kurosani would be, that's always kind of a strange situation. And and Dustin almost paid the price for it. Akira rocked him. He got a little overexcited and got impatient. And Akira had him wobbled, really, really, really good in that first round. But Poirier did what he should have done. Anytime you have a guy that's like, ranked 6 fighting a guy who's not in the top 15, they need to get in there and finish business, and that's what Dustin certainly did, and he's on a nice little roll right now.
That's correct. Yeah, I think Dustin's looked really, really good as of late, and I think to a degree, even though it was a weird matchup with Akira obviously being far out of his league, it was a bit of a risky fight for Poirier, even though I essentially had him winning by the second round in anything that he wanted. Obviously, if he had lost, it would look really, really bad on him. But just some of the things that I took away from it was Poirier looked extremely sloppy in the first round, and I think that was possibly due to him being a little bit overconfident and thinking that he really had it in the bag, and maybe just forgot that, look, at this division and in the UFC, everyone's a challenge. Akira had really, really great footwork in the first round. Poirier was just overconfident and he rushed. A lot of what he was throwing was just so rushed. But it was a great, fun first round. And obviously in the second, Dustin Poirier found his groove, and it was that awesome straight left and the big right uppercut that followed that just absolutely spelled disaster for Akira.
Yeah, and the drop on Corassani is that he fades. He always comes out strong, and it's kind of like that's 2 opponents in a row where Diego Brandao and Akira Corassani are kind of cut from the same mold where they pack some heat in the early going, but they always fade. So Poirier, I couldn't agree more than your analysis that Dustin was more than likely going to finish it any way he wanted in the second. But yeah, my big question on Poirier is when you look at anybody in that top 5 at 45. Now we've already seen him fight Cubby Swanson, and we saw how that all worked out. And that was Swanson, that was Dustin taking the fight on short notice. And yeah, that kind of plays into his storyline, but it's also played into Swanson's storyline too. Dustin's a strange guy to prepare for. If Cub had 6 weeks to prepare just for Dustin, I think it would have been it would have been a closeout fight for Swanson. I think we would have seen Dustin go down, probably in the second round in that, because Cub's one of those guys that turns it on in the second and third round. So my question is, I don't know. Dustin's 25. He's definitely going to be a guy who's hovering around that top tier, but I don't know how he's going to fare against the Chad Mendes, Ricardo Lamas's of the world, because and that honestly could be the next fight that we see him in is fighting Ricardo Lamas coming off that loss from Aldo, because Poirier has lost to Swanson, and he was finished by the Korean Zombie. So I think Dustin beats anybody from 6 on down, but I think he's really going to struggle when he gets in that upper tier.
When I was watching the fight, I was actually thinking about Akira a little bit. Dana White said that his stock went up because he wanted a tough fight. He wanted to fight Dustin. He went out and he fought. He threw punches. He won that first round. But my thought is, do you think Akira's stock goes up or do you think it goes down? I mean, it is still a decisive loss on his record, even though it was an exciting fight.
Yeah, and that's a very good question. I think, to be more specific, his stock went up at the UFC brass. I don't think it went up really with any fight fans because, yeah, he did get finished and he hit a wall and completely faded. So I don't think his stock went up with fight fans any, but I think it did go with the UFC because Joe Silva, Sean Shelby, Dana White, they love guys that ask for tough competition, and they love guys that come out and get after it. I mean, we just heard, Dana say this week that he doesn't think Phil Davis wants to be a champion. I know we're dropping topics a little bit, but it just kind of serves the point that they think he's just more than content to hang around top 5 and doesn't want any part of Jon Jones. And I think that's why, with DC and the Hendo win, there just isn't a lot of talk right now about what's going to happen after the fight between Rumble and Davis. And there should be a lot of conversation because that's a very critical fight at 205. But that's what I mean. If UFC thinks that you're just not, you don't have that fire under you, they're going to kind of push you off to the side. A guy like Akira, stepping up and wanting a tough fight like Dustin, yeah, I think that'll definitely bode well for him with the organization.
And it's almost like a double-sided coin where you have guys like Melvin Gillard, who was released recently, who always put on exciting fights. I mean, his last one was a little bit, not exciting as usual, but, Dana White loves him and you always hear great things about him. And I suppose fighters like that go out, like him and Akira go out and they put on exciting shows. thinking that at the end of the day, they will have a position with the UFC. But I think it's also dangerous because once you do get a few losses in a row, you're likely to get cut as well. And if you don't fight safe and you sort of just go out there and let it all hang, I mean, you can find yourself outside the organization, unable to go back in really due to the fact that you have lost so many fights decisively.
It's absolutely right. I mean, it's like kind of the Leonard Garcia, Dan Hardy effect. That we see guys who've lost, who get down 3 or 4 losses, and some guys get cut 2 losses. I mean, I think shortly after we talked this last time I was on your show, Jake Shields got released. After one loss. So. Yeah, it is a very double-edged sword. It's the fight business versus the entertainment business, and that was actually kind of the thought I had when I looked at the TUF Nations Finale card. I'm like, man, this is a really strong card. This could be a really strong card, but there's also a lot of situations where guys could just be fighting to win, which could make this a very slow card. And as we saw that night, it was a pretty slow card. I mean, it had its moments, but there was a couple times I had to splash some water on my face to stay conscious.
Yeah, it was a little bit like that. We definitely want to talk to you about the Jake Shields, not him being cut, but his future in general. We want to talk about that a little bit later with you. But as far as the next fight, also good on Poirier as well for setting the record for most wins in UFC featherweight history. That's awesome for him. But as far as the next fight, obviously the first TUF finale, which is the welterweights, Chad Laprise and Oliver Aubin-Mercier. Good fight, great example of I'd say Chad Laprise stepping up in a tough challenge and improving. I think a lot of people had Olivier as the favorite there, and Chad, I think he did really, really well to overcome that challenge. Completely stuffed his grappling. There was a lot of good pressure from Laprise, really good takedown defense, nice knees. He was mixing it up. What did you guys think of it?
Well, I thought this is kind of how I look at the TUF formula. I usually don't, honestly, I don't usually watch a lot of the show, even if it's the international ones or if it's the domestic ones for me. But I do start paying attention as we get towards the last fight before the finale and the finale because really it all starts on that night. Chad Laprise, it started for him that night in Quebec City, but the real challenge is going to come with his first, and I think everybody realizes this. His real challenge is when he gets in the octagon the first time out of a tough situation. But for stepping up in the moment, those guys. I spoke to Kenny Florian for my little Dropping Knowledge breakdown series heading in, and it's a really unique situation these guys are facing. And Chad Laprise definitely stepped up to the moment. Auden Mercier is a great grappler. But he's really kind of a one-dimensional fighter. And I'm not saying Laprise isn't a one-dimensional fighter because he's striking heavy, but he did what he had to do to be effective and keep the fight where he needed it to go for the entirety of the match. So yeah, he looked crisp, but I'm more interested to see what his next fight will look like.
Yeah, I agree with you guys, and it's also the case now, like you mentioned before, the Ultimate Fighter 1, 2, and 3. Even up to 5 and 6, a lot of these guys came out and they sort of went straight into the title picture. They were right up there in the top. Now, when we get the Ultimate Fighter, like you said, we're not sure whether they're going to sink or swim. They do need to win those first few fights with UFC fighters before we can see what they're made of. And to be honest with you, I did expect Oliver to win, but I thought Chad came out and he was just more composed. And I think he might have surprised a lot of people with that win.
I think also. You sometimes think about UFC jitters, and I wanted to say that both guys didn't have them, but I'd say Chad Laprise was really focused. He didn't seem like he even cared that he was fighting in the UFC on the biggest stage of his life. Olivier, maybe he had a little bit of those UFC jitters, but I think in the second round, Laprise, he honestly looked like a welterweight. I don't want to say Frankie Edgar, but he had great head movement. He was very busy, very active. And I think towards the end of the third, though, he fought a little bit smart, and he did what you were talking about a bit, Duane, and he sort of slowed down. He realized that he's got, he's about to win the contract, he's about to win tough, and he needs to sort of relax a little bit. But in general, I think it was really impressive that Chad won the season fighting above his natural weight class.
But let's not forget
Yeah.
also, sorry to cut in here, Duane, but Aubin Mercier, I think he was really rated highly by a lot of people. Even going to the show, everyone was saying, hey, this guy might be like the next GSP. And going to the finale, a lot of people were saying, this guy has such an advantage in the grappling department. I almost feel like it might have given him a false sense of security. And when he was in that ring, maybe that was some of the issues that he encountered when he realized, oh, look, Chad's not that easy to take down. I'm not just going to run over him perhaps as easily as other people thought I would.
Yeah, and that's a real thing, that's the big issue with when guys have such a phenomenal grappling base. People, it's almost fight fans or even the media, we all kind of overlook it sometimes, but you have to get, in order for Damian Maia to do what Damian Maia does or Jake Shields to do what Jake Shields does, you have to get the fight to the ground. And now guys are so well versed in takedown defense. Not just that, they're well, they work on it themselves. So they know about chain wrestling and they know about using strikes to set up their own takedowns. So they defend it much better than they used to. So for Aubin Mercier, I really think he does have a lot of potential, but if he can't get Chad Laprise down, he's going to have a heck of a time getting other fighters in the UFC down where he needs to get it to. So yeah, I think of the two, kind of how I personally would grade it, I think Chad Laprise is going to have a little bit of a kind of an easier road in because of his striking. So his striking's crisp. It really is. I think he's going to have an easier road, than Oliver.
Well, he's got some good tools. He's obviously got takedown defense, and he's got good striking. So in theory, that's exactly what you need in the welterweight division. It just really depends on how he'll deal with it. It's one thing stuffing Aubin Mercier's takedowns, but when you get to those elite wrestlers like your Tyron Woodley's, your even your Josh Koscheck's, and his striking, that's going to be interesting. But something that you mentioned, Dennis, that was interesting was, with Ultimate Fighters, you had previous champions like Forrest and Rashad, and obviously you had Diego Sanchez climbing pretty high. But I guess the tough thing about that is, pardon the pun, that was like at least 5 years more than that. And I think back then when the UFC only had a small roster of like barely 200 guys, it was so easy to find some of the best fighters that weren't in the UFC. But now that 5-6 years later, that the sport has taken off so much, and there's so many people already training MMA and mixed martial arts and things like that. You've already got like 400-500 fighters in the company. It's really hard to find guys that aren't already in the company that are actually going to make a big impact, so to speak.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And the best example of that is, watching the TUF 19, the fights to get in the house. Lyman Good came, was a Bellator champion, and he got walked. He absolutely got walked in his fight and didn't even make the TUF 19 house. And it's crazy because they actually held the tryouts in Indianapolis before the Indy card last August. So in my town, so I got to kind of float around the room and talk to some of these guys. And, the amount of, if you look at the amount of veteran talent that was just trying to get on that show, it's a crazy kind of paradox from where it was, 5 years ago when they were in the first couple seasons. But yeah, that's legitimate, man. These guys don't have an easy road, and if that's kind of the lower tier of the kind of talent pool, I mean, just because we're talking experience wise, yeah, it makes you appreciate how the guys who can fight and keep their place on the roster, how talented they really are.
Now the next fight, speaking of the whole grappler versus striker matchup, you had, well, actually I wouldn't say grappler versus striker, but you had Theodorou versus Westcott, and Theodorou just absolutely outclassed Westcott. He completely dominated in the first round, and Westcott looked like an absolute zombie and he gassed halfway into the first. How crazy was that?
When I saw, sorry to interrupt there, Duane, but when
it's okay, man.
Sorry, when I saw Sheldon run out to the ring, I thought, oh man, this isn't the Ultimate Fighter. You don't realize how much energy that's going to take out of you. And famously, the Ultimate Warrior, who recently passed away, the great Ultimate Warrior, he used to run out to the ring in a very similar fashion. And in one of his famous interviews, he said, he was gassed for the rest of his wrestling match just for that one run. And what people don't realize is, with all the adrenaline going through your body, you do a sprint like that to the ring, you're going to use up a lot of your energy, not to mention all of your adrenaline going through your body, everything going through. I don't think Sheldon really approached this fight in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, they made the reference even on the show that, even when Frankie Edgar runs out to the ring, Frankie Edgar to the cage, Frankie Edgar does it at a measured rate. It looks like he's a live wire, but he even kind of does it at a pace. He's not all out sprint like Sheldon did. But and when I watched the fight, I think the best way I summed it up is I put on Twitter after the fight that Theodorou, that was about as efficient a beating as you can put on somebody, what he did to Sheldon in that fight. I mean, it was absolutely just textbook. And, by the second round, he's throwing out high moms on the camera. I mean, there's zero worry in that situation. He had Westcott in a place that he could do whatever he wanted to him. And, yeah, an absolute lopsided fight, but a great showing for Theodorou.
Yeah, Sheldon had absolutely nothing. It was somewhat reminiscent of Randy Couture and Tito when Randy was, spanking Tito, just because he was dominating him that much. I was going to say, and I said on the show last week, I picked Sheldon to win, but I said if he doesn't do it in the first round, and I had this feeling, and I wish I committed to the prediction, but I had this feeling, because if you look at a lot of the TUF finales in general, a lot of the times it's the guys that finish in the first round that do lose, in fact, because once they do get into those deep waters, which, I mean, second round, it wasn't even deep waters, but once they don't finish in the first round, they don't know what to do. They don't have that experience. They don't have that experience of going 3 rounds, and it happens, time and time again. It's exactly what happened in this fight.
And just to pipe in on that one, I do think Sheldon Westcott is a great fighter. I think that if he came out properly, if he didn't rush things like he did in the house, if he timed himself, I think this would have been a completely different fight. I think Elias obviously came out and, he did a great job, but it was pretty much a Sheldon Westcott that was just lying there trying to catch his breath for the whole fight. I don't think it was the same Sheldon that we saw in the house.
Yeah, and Sheldon's going to definitely have to evaluate, the way he starts fights, and not even just the excitement of the moment, but Elias was saying, he pretty much had the blueprint, coming into the fight. Said I have to weather the initial storm, the initial bull rush, and then I can do my thing. I think it even worked out. I don't even think he could have predicted it would have worked out like that, because I remember when they broke apart after, the opening minute. Sheldon's arms were dropped. He looked completely spent, and I was like, man, this is not a good situation for that kid. So yeah, I definitely think, in terms of we were talking earlier with Corsani, how talking about stocks going up. I think Westcott's stock took a big hit just by the way he performed that night.
I think his new nickname should be the Canadian Zombie.
The Canadian Zombie.
I like it.
What about Elias's personality in this one, coming out, in the fight, saying the high mums, cutting a few jokes after he won? I think he might have asked Dana if one of the ring girls came with a prize. What about this guy? I think his stock went up tremendously in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can almost overdo it a little bit. Like, I've heard, maybe you guys have heard too, but I've heard a lot of people kind of get turned off by, like, even John Dodson. John Dodson's is brutal as they come inside the cage, but he's always got the big smile. He's always clowning around that way and taking selfies with the ring girls and stuff. I think it's all, and I think that's either you take whatever you take from it. And Elias in that moment, just won the Ultimate Fighter, just won the contract. He's a little excited. I think, but you have to sell yourself. You have to create a brand, and I think he took a kind of a crazy step, but he also took a good step. He was moving in the right direction.
So the next fight was obviously Patrick Cote versus the Aussie Kyle Noak. No surprises there who we were going for. I'd say this was the battle of the cybernetic knees because both guys had previous knee injuries. What are your thoughts on that fight, guys?
I thought it was a crucial fight in a lot of regards. Well, especially, Cote's on this resurgent veteran run, and I honestly thought he lost to Bobby Boker in his first 170 showing. So, he needed to come out and look good. But I thought the pressure going in this fight was more on Kyle Noak because, Noak is a guy that the UFC has a lot of they have a lot of trust and potential. Like they see his potential and they know what Kyle can be. So Kyle was coming off of this long layoff and then coaching. There's a lot going into it. Noak didn't win the fight, and that obviously hurts some. But I've never seen him look more in peak physical condition. I know from being in Albuquerque with him a couple times, he had a great training camp. So I don't think this fight hurts him so much, but it will definitely put a huge emphasis on the next fight. And if Kyle Noak does not win the next fight he has, he could be in some serious trouble as far as roster spots are concerned. But I don't think he's in that kind of trouble right now.
And we will be talking to Mike Winkeljohn after you, Duane, so we'll have to have a chat with him about that as well. But one of the things I noticed was a lack of takedown defense from Kyle Noak. I mean, I was a little bit surprised by that. Were you guys a little bit surprised by Kyle getting taken down so easily?
Well, I think he was a little bit shocked by Cote's wrestling because obviously Cote's never ever been known as a wrestler. So I think it was more shock than anything. I do think Kyle Noak's striking looked a lot better than in his past fights. I think his Muay Thai looked good. You saw a lot of push kicks, a lot of teeps. And I think maybe had he not hurt his hand at the start, he probably would have been able to defend a little bit. Noak didn't really threaten with much from the bottom though. I was a little bit disappointed by that. Cote had some nice elbows on the top. But yeah, I really think in the last round, he really needed to go for those head kicks, and he didn't. He was going for body kicks. And I remember thinking, like, I understand he has to set him up, but, he really needed to go for the kill there, and he didn't.
And I couldn't agree more with how Cote surprised him by taking, by landing the takedowns. But, there's this fight and then the main event fight, which we're going to talk about. This is something that I don't think people really appreciate. On my road trip, I talked to Joseph Benavidez recently, and he made a great point. He said that when you see a guy when you see somebody in top position and holding top position for that long, it's not that the guy on the bottom it's not that he's not trying to get up. He is trying to get up. He just can't. So thinking that if you're holding down another grown man against his will, for as long as we saw guys get held down in Quebec City, that's an impressive feat. Now, does it make the most exciting fights? Absolutely not. But it also played to the more technical side of things. Noak was winning every round. Noak was winning the early exchanges. He was landing. He was catching Patrick coming in. So the striking was definitely crisp in that sense. But Cote played the efficiency route. He played. Judges are always going to remember what happened at the end of the round fresher because it's more in their mind as the round comes to an end. So with Cote being on top like that at the end of every round, that definitely gave him the advantage. So yeah, Kyle's lack of ability to get back to his feet and his lack of throwing anything up really worthwhile off his back, that was really surprising, especially for a guy who works with such a diverse training camp. And to this camp, he trained with Tim Kennedy was his primary training partner.
I was just going to say,
and you know what Tim Kennedy does. So Tim Kennedy is going to put you on your wallet, all day long. So Kyle was put through the ringer in that. So yeah, I was surprised if he worked with Tim Kennedy for 6 weeks and couldn't get Patrick Cote off him. That's borderline alarming stuff right there.
Do you guys think that it was his hand injury at the start that might have kind of taken him out of the mind zone? I mean, I know that, a lot of fighters, when they get injured, sometimes they just go to a different place in their head. And, we watched Kyle fight in Sydney where he, tore I believe it was his ACL in his knee, and he went on and he fought the whole fight, 3 rounds. So I don't think he's the type of guy to be put off by an injury. But, I mean, do you think breaking his hand really took away his confidence from stopping those takedowns?
Well, I think
it definitely can, because you think about this, it not only does he have a hard time, kind of swimming under, but to get back to your feet, you have to post. You have to post your arm, your hand on the mat, and prop yourself up that way. So it certainly could have had an effect. But like you said, I've seen Kyle fight through some tougher stuff than that. So I just think it was just a technical issue. I think just the things Cote was doing and the way he was working his ground and pound and kind of hanging in that, fuller half guard and not really trying to advance, much. like I think it just technically spun Noke a little bit. So I think that was kind of more the problem than just the handbrake. But I could see that the hand being definitely an issue.
Yeah, I'd say the factors here were Kote's experience in him being the veteran. His improved wrestling really shocked Carl Noke. And the other thing is, I think Carl Noke, he's big for the weight class. He's a big, he's a big, tall welterweight, and he's got a lot of range that a lot of the other guys don't have. But I think for him, it's going to be more of a matter of can his body, hold up. He's had that big knee injury. He's got another hand injury. He does want to go the way of guys like, Thiago Alves and, even Anthony Pettis and Little Nog, where it just seems like they're not going fight to fight. They're going surgery to surgery. But I think as far as the next fight goes, you mentioned Tim Kennedy. Now, he had an interesting fight versus Michael Bisping. What was your take on that, Duane?
My thing with Tim Kennedy, and it was funny because I don't know if you guys saw on Twitter the next day, Tim went to make an MMA media tap dance with guys who were picking against him and stuff like that. But Tim Kennedy, stylistically, it was a nightmare for Michael Bisping coming in, and Bisping's eye and all the the long layoffs was certainly going to be a factor. I don't really care what anybody says. That was a different Michael Bisping than we've seen, and as I mentioned, alarming. This might be the way Bisping fights from here on out because that his eye was cleared. His eye was perfect going into the fight, but he was getting ripped by those overhand shots from Kennedy that just apparently didn't see coming. So I think I think we could see a different Michael Bisping from here on out, and if his depth perception and timing doesn't get better, we might not see him for all that much longer. But it was a huge win for Kennedy because here's a guy who's been asking for bigger fights since his Strikeforce days, and beating Bisping's no joke. So, I don't think it'll put him. I don't think a win over Kennedy. A win over Bisping's going to put him right up there in the title hunt. But it will definitely present an interesting challenge of who he gets next. Possibly Jacare or the winner of Musafi Munoz. After May 31st.
I think one of the things that I always notice about Kennedy is the cardio issue. I mean, obviously he did great in this fight. It went for 5 rounds, and he was on top of Bisping the whole time. But what if he couldn't take Bisping down the way that he did? And what if he was just standing up with Bisping the whole time? I mean, when he was standing on his feet, he seemed really flat. He had no movement. He looked really, really tired. Do you guys think that's going to be an issue when he versus a guy that won't let him take him down the way he did to Bisping? Do you think he might struggle in that regard?
Well, if you look at some of the top middleweights, obviously in that division, you've got guys like Anderson Silva, who I believe would give him fits as far as the striking. He wouldn't be as easy as Bisping. And even guys like Lyoto Machida, guys like Vitor Belfort, you know what I mean? Those guys, I think, will be a lot tougher to take down. And then you've got, obviously, Chris Weidman, who might not have as good striking, but he's still got very good striking. And again, I don't see him taking down Weidman, at least not consistently. So I think Kennedy has a lot of work to do on his striking, and that's the thing. If he's always going for those takedowns and he can't get him, he's gonna gas even worse. So I think maybe, I don't know whether he needs to jump on the Dolce diet and maybe lose a little bit of muscle. But yeah, I think his cardio, his maximum cardio, is going to be eventually hindered by the large amount of muscle that he has. What do you think, Duane?
Yeah, I think that's a problem, and I think going into this fight with Bisping, I saw it going either one or two ways. I thought Kennedy was going to be able to get in on him and kind of do what he ended up doing, or we were going to see a situation akin to the way what happened when Kennedy fought Luke Rockhold. If you remember that fight, Rockhold stuffed his takedowns. Kennedy got spent. His arms were low. Yeah. Luke peppered him at range. And that's the thing. We got to remember, this thing doesn't have one-shot put-away power, and historically throws way more volume than we saw him throw in that fight. So, if you look at the matchups going forward, even a guy like Gegard Mousasi, who once got taken down and held down by King Mo, Gegard, that doesn't happen to Gegard anymore. Yeah. So he's going to have a hard time. If you got a guy like Mousasi in front of you and you can't take him down, you're in big trouble. Jacare, are you going to, you really want to put Jacare on the ground? Okay, then you're diving in there with the alligator. You know what I mean? So I think Kennedy, this is a big fight for him, and he picked up a very big win, but stylistically, it was the best fight he could have asked for, in the upper echelon of that middleweight division. And I think that's why he pursued it so hard, because it is a great matchup for him. And I think he's going to have a lot of trouble going forward. And I'm not saying, no knock on Tim Kennedy that he can't pull certain things off, because he might. We've seen Jacare beat before, and we've seen, certainly seen all these guys said for Chris Weidman, end up in the loss column. But stylistically, if you look at these matchups, it's from Rockhold up. I think there's some problems for Tim Kennedy, in the coming months and obviously going into next year. That said, the dude's a gamer, so yeah, I'm excited to see it. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm more kind of worried about what we're going to see out of Michael Bisping. I don't think that eye didn't show anything good, and he looked like a different fighter. And yeah, it could definitely bode some trouble for him in the coming months.
I would agree. I think the biggest sort of takeaways for the fight for me were, I really thought Bisping was going to win. I really thought he was going to keep Kennedy at distance and just jab and pepper him, similar to the way Luke Rockhold did, because Bisping does have very underrated and decent wrestling. You saw what he did to Chael Sonnen, and he gave him fits. So I think the biggest takeaway here is not so much Tim Kennedy, but more Michael Bisping and where he's going to go, because I think he is on that verge where he's on a big decline. He used to have that going for him, where he was only beaten by TRT guys like Dan Henderson, Chael, and Vitor. But Tim Kennedy is an all natural guy who it's not even like he has the greatest cardio, and he beat him.
And I think one of the things I'd like to ask you guys your opinion on is, what do you do with Bisping next? Obviously, Duane, you mentioned the eye. It could be an issue, and if that is the case, I think the UFC needs to look closely at his eye to make sure, they're not just letting him fight and letting him take damage that he can't see. But in the case that he is healthy and it was ring rust, and Tim Kennedy did beat him, which he did. What's next for Bisping? What would you guys like to see Bisping do next?
I think, and I say this with, the utmost respect, but that's, one of the interesting things that I saw, kind of in the lead up to this fight is, Bisping's been a top 5 guy for a long time, but he's never, ever beat anybody in that top 5. He's kind of perennially hung around, and, the word is, UFC kind of gives favorable matchups. Let's look at this one real hard reality fact, is that Bisping makes a ton of money. If you look at Bisping's contract, he makes a ton of money to get out there in that octagon and fight. So the UFC's put a lot of, and a lot of promotional power behind him. So here's what I think is going to happen, and I'll be surprised if this doesn't. I think he fights the loser of Rockhold Boach. I think that's the fight that's going to happen. I know Luke's favored in that fight, and if he does it at fighting Tim Boach, look at that stylistic matchup. Boach is a wrestler, but Boach is a guy who kind of, he doesn't do explosive power doubles and doesn't scramble. He kind of gets in and uses cage pressure, but he's not a very efficient striker. So I don't think they're going to put him against a guy that can really get at that eye. And then this is what happens. He fights a guy like Boach. Say he beats a guy like Boach, then he's back in that conversation. He's back to being, Michael Bisping, and they can get a couple headline fights out of him here and there. But I really think, if Bisping was going to ever be a title contender, it would have happened 3 years ago. I think they just play him. I think he just plays the name value card and sells some tickets from here on out. But even that's debatable, depending on how he bounces back. So I don't really know, but I would expect the loser Rockhold Boach to be his next opponent.
Yeah, I would definitely agree on that one. And yeah, you're right. That's another thing that I thought. I don't think Bisping will ever hold that title, and I think this is sort of his last chance. I think he's obviously going to get, he isn't going to get anyone less than a big name. So I think someone like the loser of Rockhold Boach. I had another name in mind. Who was it? I can't even think right now. Possibly even Rich Franklin. That could be something that sells. Rich obviously doesn't have an opponent, and Bisping would sell that fight a lot. I don't know. Kung Lee's looking to come back. He's obviously had a lot of ring rust. Maybe someone like a Kung Lee, but I don't think it's really going to be anyone that will necessarily get him back to the title, because that's not going to happen. I think it's just more going to be someone for namesake, possibly Costas Philippou as well.
And guys, just on a side note, the fight happening in Quebec, Canada. Bit of a strange place to have a Bisping Tim Kennedy fight, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely thought so. I think it was neutral territory for a reason, though, because he was kind of a wild card. We didn't know, I don't think the UFC knew what, Michael was going to look like because of such a long layoff. But yeah, I think from here on out, you'll definitely see Manchester, London, those are the places that Bisping's going to fight. I was having this conversation on the road trip, talking about Conor McGregor, and, talking about how the UFC's put that promotional power behind him, and, I was talking to Cub Swanson about McGregor, and, a lot of the guys in the top 10 are kind of licking their chops, like, wanting to fight Conor McGregor because of the things that he's, said, but stylistically, guys in the top 10 are hungry because they see holes in his game. So I think that the analogy that was made was Conor McGregor's trying to be Michael Bisping and not be Dan Hardy, without becoming Dan Hardy. Yeah. And I don't say any disrespect to Dan, but Dan got a lot of that promotional firepower put on his back, like he's the next big thing, and then that only is going to last so long until he fought GSP, and GSP absolutely exposed his lack of a ground game. And then the next 4 fights, we saw it happen over and over and over and over. So, Bisping, he'll carry that flag, but I think he's just going to kind of stay and be their UK flagship guy until he hangs him up.
Just a few other things we want to talk about, because I think we've got Michael Winkeljohn coming up very, very soon. Another few things I want to talk about is Jake Shields being signed to World Series of Fighting. Now, it's a really quick turnaround. He obviously only got cut like a week, 2 weeks ago, barely. Something I think about that, it's extremely risky because now you've got John Fitch, who wasn't exactly the most exciting guy in the UFC, and then you've got Jake Shields, who again is known for the same thing, wrestling, grinding guys, and just really not having that entertaining a fight. And in World Series of Fighting, you've got 2 guys in the welterweight division that could potentially become the champion if they end up dethroning Husma Palhares. So that's something that's very risky for such a young promotion in World Series of Fighting. What do you guys think of that?
I love Jake Shields, and it's not just because I accidentally ran into him out in Sydney one night and we had a nice conversation, and I told him about, the nightlife in Sydney. It's because I've always enjoyed the guy's fights. Not a lot of people can say that. I think a lot of people are quite bored with his fights. I was actually a bit surprised when he was released. I think a lot of people were, but then a lot of people that we've spoken to, like Randy Couture, have said that, the writing was on the wall for Jake. He was getting so much money in the UFC, and it was bound to happen. But Jake certainly, I know where you're coming from, Cass, and that's the thing that, World Series of Fighting doesn't want to seem like they're just getting the UFC scraps and just taking fighters that the UFC doesn't want. But will this influence Jake to change up his style a bit? He'll be versing, apart from guys like John Fitch, there'll be a lot of talent that he'll be versing that may not be up to his level. Will we start seeing Jake finishing guys again, fighting a World Series of Fighting? What do you guys think about that?
I think it's Jake Shields and John Fitch and that style of fighter is a nightmare for a promotion like the UFC, and I think that's why they're so quick to clip these guys, and it comes as such a shock. But here's the deal: if they're not winning and they're not continuously winning and they're not going to get to that title, they're also so good that they're going to be able to beat anybody else from the top 5 down. Any prospects you have coming up, they're definitely going to be able to put them on the mat and take the hype out of them. So, if you're trying to build, exciting divisional races and you're trying to get the next wave coming up, those guys are nightmares to you. Plus, they carry a big price tag. Excuse me. Here's what I think the World Series of Fighting. Here's what I think the play is there. You're not going to find any, Michael Chandler being the exception of a guy who is, top 5 that isn't, or hasn't been in the UFC. That's obviously proven to be very rare. But, just looking at Bleacher Report, when we did Paul Harris fight, that fight got a lot, and the coverage leading in got a lot of traffic, and I think that's the grab right now for World Series of Fighting. Yes, these guys are coming with hefty price tags, and yes, their fighting style isn't exactly fan-friendly, but it's going to bring eyes to the promotion. And as a fledgling promotion, that's what they need the most right now. But here's the question, does those heavy price tags, O'Connell, Fitch, Jake Shields, Melvin Gillard, are those price tags going to sink your promotion? It absolutely could happen where, we don't see the World Series of Fighting making it another, they won't be around another 14 months. That certainly could happen. But I think that's the reason, like Ray Sefo and those guys are making those decisions. It's because, when you get a guy like Husamar Paul Harris, cut and banned from the UFC for life, people want to see his next fight. People were watching Paul Harris fight. They were tuning in to see him fight in the UFC. People tune in to see Jake Shields and John Fitch. I personally love both guys' styles. I think it's efficient, but I also like what Ben Askren does, and that's maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment or masochistic. I'm not sure, but I dig it. I dig when somebody does something so good that another human being can't stop them from doing it. But at the same time, on the business side of it, it does present some obvious problems. So, yeah, I think Jake Shields coming to World Series of Fighting, they have a nice little welterweight division, and it just got stronger. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see kind of if it doesn't have the Fedor effect. So kind of like what Fedor did to Strikeforce,
Yeah, I would agree. Now, something else that I want to talk about is obviously Big Nog getting, absolutely brutally knocked out by Roy Nelson. And it's at that point where I think a lot of people have been saying he should retire. But now it's really that point where you say, does he retire or does he fight Frank Mir for the third time like he wants? What do you guys think of that?
Just on Nogueira, he's a great fighter, and he's done so much in his career. I think if he retired at this point, there's not much left for him to do. And I think a third Frank Mir fight wouldn't really prove anything, in my opinion. I think if Mir was higher up in the rankings, if there was something to gain from it. But at the same time, I can see why the UFC would put this fight together. Mir's been on a downslope for a while now. He's people are talking about Mir in terms of, will Mir be retiring? It's a couple of guys that are looking to, possibly stay in the sport a little bit longer. Why not pair them together? But ultimately, I think as a fan of Nogueira's, I wouldn't mind seeing him retire and, just kind of go out, while he's still got some health left and, while not get any more injuries in training and another possible fight.
I kind of think that, I don't know. I think it's a tough one. On one hand, a legend like Nogueira, he's earned so much in the sport, and I think out of respect, it's almost like give him the fight if this is what he wants. And sometimes guys are really hard to reason with as far as retiring. But Nogueira is saying he wants one more fight, regardless of whether he wins or loses, he'll retire. So I think that's a good little incentive. At the same time, there's the fact that we've already seen these guys fight twice, and as a Nogueira fan, I was going for him both times, and it was so sad to see him, first get knocked out or TKO'd, then get his arm broken. So the other thing is, I don't really want to see this fight. Just honestly, as a fan, I'm spent, I'm done. I don't really want to see it, and I don't know that there's too many other fans that would want to see it. Then, if they put it together, where's this fight happening? Like, what do you do with it? I'd hope it's not a main event. So what do you do? They have big names. Is it a co-main event? Do you put it middle of the card? Like, do you put it on a fight night? Like, it's just strange. What do you think, Duane?
Well, I think it's no secret the Nogueira brothers have been held together by Scotch tape for the better part of the last 5 years. They have. I mean, who knows where Little Nog is right now? He's on a milk carton somewhere. But at the same time, seeing that happen to Big Nog, seeing Big Country just melt him with that right hand, that was as brutal a knockout as we're going to see in mixed martial arts. But here's the thing: when they talk about the Nogueira Frank Mir thing, I don't think it's at all for Nogueira's benefit. I think on the flip side of the coin, it's for Frank Mir's benefit. Frank Mir is in that dubious position of having lost 3 straight, and people kind of calling for his cancellation, getting cut from the UFC. We've definitely, we've talked about 5 guys who deserve roster spots, more than Frank Mir does right now. But Frank Mir's a company guy, so I could see retirement, both guys having one more fight left and say, hey, look, we're going to retire. Just let me do it on my own terms. And that matchup would absolutely favor Frank Mir because of the way the first 2 have gone. But as far as me personally, I don't want to ever see Antonio Nogueira fight again. And not because any disrespect to him, but for a guy who's accomplished so much. I mean, you even heard Roy Nelson say it. I mean, Roy even looked kind of somewhat emotional after the fight, like, thank you. He thanked him, and he's like, you are the heavyweight. Like, that's the fighter, the heavyweight fighter people have aspired to be. The guy who's had so many wars, and he won the Pride belt, had the interim UFC belt. Walk away, man. Like, just let it be. He's had so many health. He's only 37, I think it says, like, on Wikipedia, but the dude looks like he's in his 60s. So I think you just have to let it be and walk away. Nobody wants to be carried out of their final fight like that. But I don't see it working out any other way. I think that's what happens to him. His chin got shut off a long time ago, and he's not going to be able to fight a small. There aren't any smaller heavyweights like back when he fought Randy Couture to fight anymore. I think people will remember Nogueira for the great things he's done. I think they'll actually remember him more for like the Brandon Schaub knockout. Like, think about that. If Nogueira would have just walked away after the Brendan Schaub knockout, and that's the Michael Jordan against the Utah Jazz shot. You win the big fight. Anderson Silva celebrate with you. It's front of your countrymen. On the biggest stage, boom, you have it. But they don't ever do that. They stick around and they end up getting completely blitzed in Abu Dhabi. Same thing happened in Crow Cup. Everything. That's how this is a brutal sport where athletes, their career window doesn't close. It slams shut on them. And Nogueira right now has had it slammed shut, and he's trying to pry it back open. But if I'm the UFC, I don't book that third Frank Mir fight. I just, I encourage him to kind of go quietly into the good night and just, enjoy the great career he's had.
I would agree with that. Speaking of booking fights, now this is a really interesting fight coming up, and it's actually going to be headlined, I believe it is, June or July 28th? I think June 28th in our neighbours New Zealand. Now you've got Nate Marquardt, obviously former middleweight who went down to welterweight, and he's now going back to middleweight against James Tahuna, the Kiwi, or Aussie, however you want to look at him. And he's going from light heavyweight down to middleweight. Now, this is a really bizarre matchup. What do you guys think about this one?
Well, we got Nate on the show a little bit later on, and we're going to have a bit of a chat with him to see how he's going. But Nate Marquardt's another one of those guys that perhaps, the door in his career is it's not slamming shut. It's like when you go into an apartment block and it slowly closes behind you, and sometimes you don't have a key and you try and grab it and it closes and then you're locked out. It's sort of one of those things. And, I think Nate's a great fighter, but, certainly something's been off in his career. And maybe it's the cut to welterweight, maybe he just felt really tired, really exhausted. Maybe that took away from his chin. But the move up to middleweight, I think this might be, if Nate loses this one, this might be the last time we do see Nate fight in the octagon.
I absolutely think if Nate loses this fight, it will absolutely be the last time we see him inside the octagon. And, I hate to kind of get on to heavier topics, but let's ask the question. Has Nate Marquardt post TRT been the same Nate Marquardt before TRT? He doesn't have, the guy who fought and beat Tyron Woodley isn't the guy who's shown up these last few times in the octagon, getting knocked out by Ellenberger, getting put away by Hector Lombard. Now, don't get me wrong, those guys are both, they sling some heavy leather, but you mentioned it, you just said it, his chin just hasn't been the same, and I think a lot of what's happened to Nate Marquardt is just kind of career indifference, you know what I mean? Like before, when he was in the UFC, and even in the Strikeforce, he had an idea of an identity and a path. Like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to be a middleweight wrecking machine, or I'm going to Strikeforce. I'm going to be their 170-pound champion. After, having the fallout with the UFC and then coming back after Strikeforce closed the doors, I don't think Marquardt has really had that definitive identity of where he fits in. And I think that's kind of had him waffling a little bit. I've talked to Nate plenty of times over my career, throughout the course of his career, during interviews, and Nate is, as you guys will see talking to him, he's a guy who, he's pretty straightforward in how he approaches things. And I just don't see that comfortability in him that I used to see when he would, go in there against a guy like Dan Miller or, any other fight. Yeah, and I think it all changed in Pittsburgh. I think everything changed in Pittsburgh when he was supposed to fight Rick Story, and everything happened after that. He had the, bad PR fallout. He got a second chance in Strikeforce. Started coming together good for him, and then it just kind of hit a wall, and I don't think he's ever recovered from that. So I think if I think the loser of Marquardt Tahuna, which I got to say too, I think is definitely a strange pairing. I think they lose their spot in the UFC for good.
I would almost question how much the UFC likes Marquardt, because this seems like a very tough matchup for him. I mean, you've got James. If you look at Marquardt's last couple of fights, he got knocked out, pretty badly, and then you've got James Tahuna, who does knock out guys. He might not have elite striking, but it's pretty decent, and he knocks people out, and he's dropping down to middleweight. So theoretically, he would at least have the strength advantage. Nate obviously having he's obviously a veteran, so he'd have the experience advantage. I mean, that's the other thing. Nate Marquardt, he's been fighting for a long time. He was the first middleweight pancrase champion. So I think, with all due respect, this is going to be the one that really not defines Nate Marquardt, but it's going to be a big test for him. This is the one that's going to say he's either going to get cut from the UFC, or he can. At the same time, if he wins, I think it's going to be a big win for him. What do you guys think?
It's interesting that you mentioned his relationship with the UFC, because obviously, as Duane, you mentioned, he did have that big fallout with a Rick Story fight, and it's not one of the first times that he's had a fallout with the UFC. I'm actually surprised they've kept him around this long. Just on my personal opinion, after we saw Nate lose that second fight, I thought the UFC might cut him then. I'm not sure how much if they're paying him, the same amount of money that they used to, but it sort of seems like a no-brainer for the UFC, considering how much they pay him to cut him then. Are you guys actually surprised by the fact that he's, sticking in the UFC this long?
Well, I'll tell you what, I was in Pittsburgh covering the fights when all that went down, and let me tell you, and all the shows I've ever covered live, and as long as I've kind of worked this circuit, I've never seen anything quite like that. I mean, there was so much confusion abound, and I think that not only affected Marquardt's career drastically, it also affected Rick Story's career drastically, because he had just come off that Alves win, he was riding high, he had a chance to fight Nate Marquardt, he jumped on it, 4 weeks notice, and then all of a sudden, bam, 24 hours before the fight, he doesn't know if he's fighting for about an hour, and then he finds out he can fight Charlie Brenneman, who was originally scratched from the card, so, I don't think the UFC... Yeah, and loses, and he was never the same since. So I think the amount of animosity that came out of that for having that card scrapped, almost scrapped, the main event, went to the co-main, and I think especially you could hear it in Dana White's voice afterwards, I think he was pissed about what happened just from a promotional standpoint, and I think he was also really upset for Rick's Story, what all happened there. So I don't think he ever regained favor with the UFC, and then Strikeforce signed him over, and then he became kind of the UFC's situation then. But like you just said, it is kind of surprising. I thought after Lombard knocked him out that he was definitely going to get cut. I just had that feeling, and he didn't, and now he's got another fight booked. So yeah, I mean, but if you look at it in terms, like you mentioned, with the how his relationship sits and the matchups that he's getting, I mean, that kind of tells the story, right? That the guys they're putting him against, that's not the easy way to go. The Bisping kind of route, saying loosely, he's not getting favorable matchups whatsoever. He's getting in there with absolute destroyers. So yeah, I think Tahuna, Tahuna's got, bomb power at 205, and he's only going to be faster at 85. But Tahuna's also proven he's got a button that can be flipped too. So both guys have got chins that have been checked and wrecked in the past. So I think somebody definitely goes to sleep, whether it's the Colorado native or the Wyoming native or it's the Kiwi. Somebody's sleeping the good sleep, in that fight.
Yeah, there'll be no snowboarding for someone on that night. It's definitely an interesting matchup. It's definitely an interesting matchup, to say the least. I think I know we've got Mike Winkeljohn coming up right now. So we're going to do this interview with Mike Winkeljohn, and then Duane will have it back on, and we'll do some predictions.
That sounds great. I'm here and ready to fire them off.
Awesome.
All right, guys, we'll be back with Mike Winkel right after this.
That could be one of the greatest fighters to ever live.
He's amazing. But Jon Jones' title may be in jeopardy. Glover Teixeira is a killer. Unbeaten now in 20 fights. Oh, he got no. He is a legit threat. Glover Teixeira. Oh! He's on such a different level. Jon Jones. That might be the greatest title
Our next guest on the show is a 3-time world champion, a 2-time Muay Thai champion, and he is one of the greatest MMA coaches, striking coaches in the business. He is a well-respected figure in MMA. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Winkeljohn is on the show. Mike, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. There's a lot of things I want to get your thoughts on. Probably one of the main things is recently we had obviously the TUF Nations Finale where a few of your fighters fought. One of the Aussie fighters, Kyle Noak, fought at the most recent one. He couldn't quite put it together and beat Patrick Cote. What were your thoughts on his fight, and what will we be working on for the future with Kyle Noak?
Just a lot of disappointment in what happened and how it played out. Kyle hurt his hand previously a little bit, but he definitely busted in the first round of that fight. And he was hurting Patrick with the stand. Patrick even said after the fight he had a hard time closing the gap, and Kyle caught him with a knee and almost finished him, hurt his leg with some kicks from the outside. But the problem was he couldn't grip with his thumb. So I'm not making excuses for him. Patrick Cote's got a hard head. It is what it is. I was just disappointed in the way it finished because I was very, very confident going into that fight with the Kyle Noak everywhere. In fact, honestly, the game plan was to definitely beat him with long strikes standing up, but then in the clinch take him down. It just didn't play out that way.
Now, a lot of Australians are going for Kyle in this fight. Patrick really came out and showed an interesting game. He looked like he really worked on his takedowns. Were you guys surprised that Pat was going for so many takedowns, considering Kyle is such a great submission artist?
You know what? I think he didn't want to, stand up with Kyle Noak at long range. He felt, I think, if he got close, it was a different story. But I think he felt that was not going to work. So it didn't surprise me that he'd been working on him. I had heard he'd been working on him. What bummed me out was our takedown defense was just not up to speed for many reasons, which you can't make excuses for. And Patrick took us down. He did a great job.
Also, I wanted to ask you, by the third round, Kyle was obviously down 2 rounds. He was throwing a lot of body kicks. At that point, he really needed a finish, but obviously had the hurt hand. What was the game plan at that point going into that third round?
Oh, I definitely wanted to kick him in the head. There's no doubt. I knew that the right hand was open. I was trying to get him to kick low, fake low, and kick him in the head. That's what I had told him in between rounds was you've got to knock him out. We need a head kick. Just because I knew how bad his hand hurt, and it's easier said than done to throw a broken hand continuously at somebody. So I definitely, my thought was go with the feet.
And do you think that it was an issue at all? Because, Kyle did have a bit of a long break in between fights. Do you think a little bit of ring rust played into it as well?
I don't know. Maybe a little bit. I think I might put a little bit in it. I think just Kyle's had a series of injuries that have kept him out of training. I don't think the ring rust in the fight scene was for him as much. It's just he's been on again, off again with some bad luck and some training injuries. But that fight should have been ours. It's just one of those real disheartening moments.
Now, another fighter of yours obviously fought in the main event in Tim Kennedy. He beat a very tough Michael Bisping using his superior wrestling, and he also managed to rock Bisping on multiple occasions. What were your thoughts on Tim's fight, and do you think he was a bit too hard on himself that he didn't finish?
Oh, yeah, that's Tim Kennedy. He definitely hard on himself. I was very proud of him. Tim beat him everywhere. Michael Bisping is hard to take down. Tim took him down more often than anybody else, as far as I know, and was able to hold him down. He was able to pass him out, just to control Michael everywhere. He got himself a little gassed out in the first round. I think we had too much of a warm-up up in the back when Kyle Noak was fighting. And but then he took over the striking, too. So, he hurt him multiple times with his stand-up, especially with his overhand. And I think Michael just couldn't control his explosiveness. Tim's getting so good at using the power that's in his legs that he could be a force to be reckoned with here real soon.
Yeah, Tim was absolutely impressive, and it was great to see him, work on those takedowns to get Bisping down. A lot of people are sometimes critical on Tim about losing energy during fights and, potentially gassing out during fights, but he looked great. But one of the things people always ask is, do you think that he's got a lot of muscle for his frame and does have issues with lactic acid buildup throughout the fight sometimes?
You know what? In the gym, he doesn't have an issue with it. You know what? He did 5 hard rounds with Michael Bisping. He was going really hard at the end. That's all I can say to people that think he's not, conditioned athlete. It hasn't been the lactic acid hasn't been really hurting him that much. I think it was honestly, I think we probably, Tim has a tendency to hit a go button when he warms up, and we warmed up for probably a good hour in the back where the guys had him warming up when I was out with Kyle Nelson. I think that played out a little bit with it, but it also, makes a difference when you're shooting out somebody and they're holding their head down for extended long periods of time and you're trying to finish the takedown. It takes a lot out of people. People understand how rough it is in there sometimes in those little scrambles and those little, want to finish takedowns.
Now, I wanted to ask you, obviously, Travis Browne is quickly becoming one of the best-known fighters coming out of the Jackson Winkeljohn camp. He's also fighting tomorrow against Fabricio Verdum in a number 1 contender fight for the World Heavyweight Championship, so it's obviously a pretty big deal. What is the game plan for Fabricio, and how do you see the fight playing out?
Oh, he's got to get Travis down to the ground. He's been working on his stand-up. He's definitely been working more on his Muay Thai. But you know what? Travis is an anomaly. He's kind of like a Jon Jones in that he's so long and can strike at such range. Unless people are working on their footwork along with the Muay Thai, they're not going to get there, for most of the fight. So I think that's going to pose a big problem for Fabricio. But I think as the fight plays on and Travis is going to beat him up, he'll pull guard and do whatever he can to get to the ground.
Would you say that Travis Browne is one of the more athletic, one of the most athletic heavyweights that you've seen in MMA?
Yes. You know what? He's got the college basketball behind him. He's very athletic. He's got good footwork. He can change angles real well. And he's starting to study so much more about the game and being in the right place at the right time and believing in himself that his game has changed tremendously over the past couple of years.
I think it's pretty crazy given how tall Travis Browne is and how big of a heavyweight is, and yet he's gotten so light in the last few years, and his footwork, he looks almost like a Dominic Cruz out there when he's dancing around. But also, assuming Browne wins, what do you think, and obviously gets that shot, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge he'll face going up against Cain?
Oh, you know what, depending on the relentless pressure with takedowns, Cain's going to be throwing bombs at him and trying to press him up against the cage and trying to, complete takedowns. It's going to be a matter of, honestly, keeping the distance and putting the fear of God in Cain to attack him, where he slows him down, makes him reach for dumb things. He's going to have to stretch it out. Can he beat him in all these other places? Yeah, possibly. But in my world with Travis, if I can get him to stretch fights out lengthwise, where you keep his opponent at a far distance, at a far range, we win every time.
Now, one of Travis's former fights, Alistair Overeem, is rumored, or people are saying that he's coming over to the Winkeljohn Jackson camp. Is there any truth to that rumor? And if so, are you looking forward to working with a striker such as Overeem?
Oh, I'm excited to book a striker like him, but there's a lot of things I want to do. He's got great striking, but he needs to change it. I feel we can help him change that a little bit for MMA, and just to type in a way and where to be at different times. He's coming. He's planning on coming. I have not spoken with him yet, but as soon as he comes, I'm excited to be working with him.
I wanted to ask you, because when Alistair was training at the Black Zillions, he mostly brought in his own guys and he did his own sparring, sometimes late at night when everyone went. Fighters these days, they're saying that MMA is very much a team sport and you rely on your team to get you to that next level. Do you agree with this, and will there be a heavy focus on involving Alistair and getting him involved with the team as much as possible?
Oh, he's going to need to. That's just the way our camp is. It's first and foremost, you have to help others. And if you start helping other people out, if he's going to help other people out with his stand-up and his knowledge on different positions, then the team's going to help him. If not, he will be ostracized real quick and he'll be gone. The guys won't do it themselves. They don't really need us or me to be the jerk about it, which I'm usually the jerk, but it just happens that way. It's just, that's why we're so good at what we do, I think, is the guys help each other. And that's huge, because they can't do it by yourself. No matter how good you think you are, you need to help others to become successful in the sport.
Now, we had Bass Rutten on recently, and he mentioned that he thinks one of the downfalls for Overeem recently, since leaving Golden Glory, is he doesn't keep that one hand up by his chin when he throws punches, and he used to be more of a singular punch thrower. Now he's putting together combinations and leaving his chin open. Is that one of the changes you'd be looking to make if Overeem does come over to the Winkeljohn Jackson camp?
You know what? He's so strong. The guy can hit hard. I mean, like Travis Browne told me how hard he can hit. But the thing is, I want him to not be striking and then staying in a place where he can get counterpunched and or taken down. He needs to be striking, and a slight angle changes, I think, will change his game tremendously.
Now, on to another one, another fighter of yours, someone who's really coming up quickly in the ranks, and not just the ranks, but as far as popularity, and that is Holly Holm. Now, Ronda Rousey, until a few days ago, she was without a clear opponent, and even now, nothing's really official. And with Ronda Rousey, a lot of her last fights were against grapplers. Now, you've obviously got the amazing, experienced striker Holly Holm. Do you think Holly Holm is ready for a fight with Ronda Rousey, and do you think now's the time, to set that title fight up?
You know what? Now's not the time to set the fight up. I wanted a couple more fights. Holly's coming off a broken arm. She broke in her last fight early in the first round, and she still destroyed the girl and kicked her in the head, knocked her out, and defended takedown. In fact, took the girl down. But Holly's there. She will beat Ronda Rousey if Ronda's still champ, after Holly's in the UFC for a couple fights. I want a couple more tune-up fights. Holly's on a fast track working on her grappling. She's getting very good at it. But I want the confidence for Holly to be there in every position so that she can let her hands and let her feet go without the worry of the clinching getting tossed in different positions. She's standing tall in front of Ronda.
As people have noted in the news, apparently Holly has gotten offers up to $250,000, a fight to fight in boxing. However, the UFC apparently is only offering her about $15,000 or $30,000 to fight in MMA. But Holly seems like somebody who's driven to be a champion and driven by challenges. Do you think that that's going to be an issue with her going into the UFC, making so much less initially to get into MMA?
Well, there's many different ways to make money out there, and being in the UFC is probably her best avenue to make money off sponsors, different things she can do. She's very talented at things. And so the UFC is where we want to be. And the numbers have come up behind the scenes. There's no doubt about it. We're trying to work something out right now, and I definitely see Holly signing the UFC here pretty soon. The World Series of Fighting has offered her more money. A lot of people are starting to offer more money that I'll let her manager talk about. But all the numbers a little bidding war has begun, and we're quite excited about it. But we want the UFC.
Now, you've obviously had Holly training with you for a long time, a number of years. You've also got Julie Kedzie with you as well. Do you ever stop and think how crazy it is about how women's MMA has evolved literally in the last couple of years, where if you look back maybe 3 years, there was a stance on no way, it's never going to happen, never in the UFC, and now you've got women like Ronda and Holly and Julie, even Cyborg just making so many headlines. What are your thoughts on that in general?
Girl fights are good. They have a tendency to go very hard, and they're real good at what they do. The skill level has come way up. I think Ronda has brought attention to it, busting people's arms. So that got some excitement behind it. Now they're going to pick up Holly Holm. Holly got so many highlight films of just kicking people in the head over and over and knocking them out. And she has highlight films of kicking people in the ribs and breaking ribs and stopping fights and leg kicks and one body punch type of situations that's going to sell. And I think once Holly gets there, this whole thing of women's MMA is going to go to a higher level. I mean, years ago you had Ali versus Frazier. I think it's going to be that level.
Wow. And you know what? You have a great point. I suppose one of the criticisms about women's MMA coming from a lot of MMA fight fans is the level of striking isn't quite at the level that you'd expect at a professional level. Obviously, there's not much head movement. A lot of girls rush in head first and just throw bombs. When watching women's MMA, does that ever bother you as a coach, seeing the level of MMA women's striking for a lot of the professional fighters?
Well, I don't want my fighters to be that way, and Holly's definitely not that. Holly's at a whole different level. She's easily the best striker, woman striker in the world, of the planet. She can make it happen. And what's funny is has numerous world titles in boxing, beating the who's list of world champions out there in boxing. But she's just sick of it. She's just tired because there's always one more fight. Her feet, her kicks are better than her hands. That's what's so funny about it. And MMA makes her hands more effective because the gloves are smaller. There's different holes to be hit. People can't cover up. So she's just constantly knocking people out now.
Now, obviously, by now, everybody would know that there's a huge title fight coming up between Jon Jones and Glover Teixeira. Obviously, Jon Jones is from your camp. Now, Jon Jones recently said on Twitter, "It's funny because I still look at myself as a rookie in the sport. pretty good in every category in the game, but not really great at anything. It seems like he's selling himself very short. As a coach, would you agree with this? And what do you think his best fighting attribute is?
He's definitely not the average guy out there. He's an anomaly in that he's a student of the game and he studies so much. He knows, we watch so much tape, and he watches 10 times more tape than I do with him. He studies fighters. He knows when they're going to flinch. He watches things in slow motion. So he's prepared for the fight. It's not just about being long and athletic. He's prepared for the fight mentally, and he believes himself. With that being said, Jon Jones, really, he can trip anybody out there. He can toss people. He's very hard to take down because of his length. And now you add his long strikes that we've developed, it becomes a real serious problem for people to try to close the gap on him and take him down. They constantly have the fear of running into different strikes, and it's very unpredictable, which is, of course, part of my plan. And his future is even brighter. If he stays on course and keeps his head straight, I think you're going to see a much more improved Jon Jones as the years go on.
Now, Glover Teixeira is a really popular fighter, but a lot of people are overlooking Glover. Obviously, he's not the biggest name that Jon's faced, and everybody's already talking about his matchups after that. How important to you as a trainer has it been to make sure that Jon is focused on Glover Teixeira and knows how dangerous Glover really is? Because obviously, he does have a very well-rounded game and devastating striking.
Oh, goodness, yeah. He's very, very strong. I mean, just some of the things he's done, just incredibly strong. He's very hard. He's very dangerous. He's probably one of the most dangerous opponents Jon's ever fought. I think the speed of Ishida coming in might have scared me more, but Glover hits so hard. If Jon stays in the pocket, we can lose this fight easily. So Jon's taking him serious. I know I'm taking him serious. And, we expect a good fight, but I expect Jon to pick him apart, take him down, elbow him in the face a little bit, and then when we back up, do what he did to Rampage Jackson, just break him down, make him want to quit.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to touch on. A while ago, someone asked Jon on Twitter what his thoughts were on Glover Teixeira, and Jon replied with, Glover Teixeira is like Rampage Jackson with better grappling. Obviously, in their fight, Rampage didn't really do anything striking-wise. And obviously, Jon dominated him on the grappling. It sort of came off as if like he wasn't too worried about the striking. Is that? I mean, obviously, I can see Jon training hard. Is there any truth to this, or do you think Glover is a much more dangerous striker than Rampage?
I don't think his defense is as good as Rampage's by any means, but I think he definitely has a punching power that Rampage had. I think he can extend his punches better than Rampage. Rampage had, I think, some really good tighter type of shots, but it's a length that is Jon's advantage. So when someone can strike a little better at length sometimes, that, of course, causes a little bit of a problem.
How much do you think Jon's reach really helps his overall game? Because obviously he's an amazing athlete. He's an amazing grappler. But how important do you think that reach really is? Obviously, we saw versus Gustafsson. Gustafsson had a long reach as well, so it was a very close fight. Do you think the reach really plays into perspective, how important that is in MMA?
I think it just depends on how you fight. If you know how to use your reach, it's definitely an advantage. If you're the short guy like the Mike Tysons of the world, and the short explosive guys, Rashad Evans and a lot of guys at Cormier, they know how to get there, and they're so compact and explosive, they make it work for them. So it's all about knowing what your tools are and how to use your tools best to defeat your opponent.
Now, people, as far as Jon Jones goes, people are already setting up future opponents for Jon and the likes of Gustafsson and Cormier. But after those guys, there doesn't seem to be too many new contenders emerging. I mean, maybe Phil Davis, depending on how he goes. As a fight fan, it's always exciting to see people going to new divisions and facing new challenges. And we've heard this for a while. Is Jon still planning a move up to heavyweight? And if so, when can we expect this?
He does plan on going to heavyweight one of these days. I don't expect it soon. We haven't had discussions on when or what's going on. Jon's just still focused on this fight right now. So I'm sure he wants to clean out the division first. There's some things that people that get on his nerves he wants to take care of. But with that being said, Jon's always there for a challenge and wants to move up to heavyweight eventually and dominate heavyweight as well.
just from your perspective as a fight fan and a coach, if Jon does get through to Teixeira, who would you rather see him face? Obviously, Dana White has come out and said the winner of Dan Henderson, Daniel Cormier, will be getting the potential title shot. But then Gustafsson has also been campaigning for another fight. Obviously, their fight was an absolute classic. Which fight would you rather see, depending on if Jon wins this following fight?
Well, personally, I know what we did wrong with Glover. I'd like to see Jon fight Glover. I'm not sure where his head's on with that, because I think he wants to hit Cormier as well and make Glover, not Glover, but Gustafsson suffer a little bit and make him wait. It's just a mental game that way. But Jon doesn't fear either one of those guys. And when he fights Gustafsson next time, we'll see a totally different Jon Jones, much better Jon Jones than last time. We did some things wrong, and it's going to be that much better. So personally, I kind of want to see Jon defeat Gustafsson in a dramatic way, in a big way, highlight film kind of way, just to prove everybody, wrong what they were saying the first time.
I think you're right. I think in this sense, Jon Jones possibly needs to defeat Gustafsson and do it convincingly to erase that close fight from people's minds. After that fight, I guess I got a few-part question. What were the things that surprised you about Gustafsson, and what were the things that you guys as a camp learned from that fight and wanted to improve on with Jon afterwards?
His takedown defense was very, very good. His takedown defense was good. He worked off angles a little bit on some things, and his willingness to press forward in different positions was impressive. He's very strong. I was just real impressed with the takedown defense, and the fact that he shot in on Jon, which doesn't normally happen, caught Jon off guard. So, mainly he's a very strong kid.
If the rematch obviously does happen, during the fight, would you want to prefer more emphasis on Jon's striking or his wrestling?
Well, I'm a striking. Hey, I'm a striking coach. I'm the whole game planner as well. But I think it's a combination of two. I think you take somebody down, they fear a takedown so much that if you take the takedown, the opening's right there for you with the striking, and vice versa. So it's always a blend in MMA, and the best fighters in the world are guys that have to blend those two together. So there's no doubt we had a hard time with the takedowns in the last fight for many reasons. And this time you'll see definitely a blending of both. A little bit more power on the strikes when they do come off.
Now, Mike, you were a professional fighter for 17 years. I don't know if the Australian MMA fans knew about that, but you were a really great fighter. Obviously, a three-time world champion with the ISKA, a two-time Muay Thai champion. Just a great fighter in your own right. Previously, you've been quoted as saying that you didn't think you were a smart fighter, that you thought you sometimes fought stupidly. Can you expand on that for us and tell us how that sort of influenced your coaching game now that you are coaching some of the best athletes in the world, similarly to yourself?
You know what it is? I had my coach always say, hey, Mike, why don't you slip that punch and come in off angle? And I would say, yeah. And I would just go straight forward like a dummy. And so I think I could have won some of the big legendary fights if I would have listened to my coach. And so, you always get wiser, I guess, at age. It's a shame when it's too late to use it on a physical level. And so I kind of want to make sure my fighters were able to hit and not get hit. That was the key to me, and fitting up different things with power. I've seen a couple of deaths in the cage, not the cage, in the ring, and that scares me. It scares me to see fighters that take a lot of damage to the head. So as with Holly Holm and everybody else, I have a tendency to really make them work on their footwork, work on their angles, and it's played out so well in MMA because the game is getting stretched out farther and farther, where people are starting to fight from longer ranges. And so it's really just becoming about the footwork, because if you don't have your feet underneath you, you can't take them down. If your feet are not underneath you, you can't hit them. And if you can't hit somebody because you're at the wrong place, you fail. So footwork has become a big, big part of MMA.
Now, Mike, obviously you're a great boxer, great kickboxer, great coach and striking, and you know a lot about both boxing, kickboxing, and MMA. Now that MMA is not as young as it used to be, who do you think has a shorter career span, boxing or kickboxers, or do you think MMA is starting to show us that the career span in MMA is actually quite short?
Oh, I think it all can be short. It just depends. It's just there's so much going on in MMA that people are getting their knees tweaked because of takedowns and shot on, and that's hurting them. I think kickboxing is the most painful of all of them because of the constant damage. You got to stand there and take more. I think that the brain damage, of course, from boxing, long-term health, boxing is the worst because there's one target, pretty much. They hit bodies, but it's constant brain trauma where in MMA, you can grapple, you can wrestle, you can keep the legs. It's not constantly hitting the head. So everyone's a little different. I think that, if you do it right, if you don't overspar, if you stay healthy and you have good physical therapists around you and good people helping you, you can really extend your career a long time.
All right, Mike. Now it is time in the interview where we do what we call the submission radio tap out round. We're basically going to fire off a bunch of questions. It's kind of like word association, and you just basically tell us the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Okay, shoot.
Okay. If you're beginning your fighting career now, would you be an MMA fighter or stick with striking?
MMA.
What were your first thoughts when you heard about MMA for the first time?
Wow, what the heck are those guys doing out there?
If you could train any fighter past or present in any fighting sport, who would it be?
If I get a current fighter?
Any, past or present.
Past or present. What I want to train? Royce Gracie, man, teach him how to strike properly.
That would be something. Who's the biggest practical joker at the Winkeljohn Jackson camp? And you have to give us an example as well.
John Dodson, constantly playing jokes on people and hugging on people in ways that irritate me because I'm old and I'm not a hugger.
What's the most difficult preparation for a fight?
What's the most difficult? Excuse me, what?
What was the difficult most preparation? Like, what was the hardest fight camp?
Oh, the hardest fight camp? Rashad Evans, Machida.
How would you best describe your coaching style?
No nonsense.
After Nogueira's last fight, would you like to see him fight Mir for a third time, or do you think it may be time for Nog to retire?
I think maybe a third time.
What's there to do in Albuquerque for fun?
Mountains, climbing mountains.
If you weren't a fighter or a coach, what would your dream job be?
If it was not airline pilot, fighter pilot.
Have you ever had any run-ins with snakes or scorpions while doing your famous runs in the desert?
No, never.
What's better, retiring early or retiring too late?
Retiring too late.
Tell us your favorite joke.
Don't have one.
Okay, last of all, you're stranded on an island. You can only bring 3 things with you. What do you bring?
I'm stranded on an island. What do I bring? International phone, water, and a supply of food.
Okay.
He's a very practical man, ladies and gentlemen. He is Mike Winkeljohn, one of the greatest striking coaches and nicest guys in MMA. You can check him out on Twitter at MMA Coach Wink and www.coachwink.com. Mike, great interview and good luck for John in his upcoming fight and Travis tomorrow against Fabricio Verdum.
Hey, I appreciate it. They're going to be fun. Watch everybody. It's going to be exciting. And be ready every second. They strike really well.
Absolutely, guys. It's going to be a great fight this week and the Jon Jones fight. And we'll have to get you on the show in the future to talk about what happens.
I'd love to be back, guys.
Excellent. Thanks for being on the show, Mike. You have a great day.
All right, thanks.
I could be one of the greatest fighters to ever live.
He's amazing. With Jon Jones' title may be in jeopardy, Glover Teixeira is a killer. Unbeaten now in 20 fights. Oh, he got no. He is a legit threat. Glover Teixeira. Oh! He's on such a different level. Jon Jones. That might be the greatest title fight in the history of the light heavyweight division. Wow.
So there you have it, guys. Mike Winkeljohn talking about a whole lot of things. And as always, we'll have exclusives on YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, and TuneIn. So check that out. But we're back here with Duane Finley, and we're going to do some predictions for obviously the big fight coming up, the Fight Night, Travis Browne versus Verdum. We'll start from the bottom of the main card because I think we're running a little bit low on time. So first fight, Brad Tavares versus Yoel Romero. That's the main card curtain jerker. I've got this picked as fight of the night without a shadow of a doubt. What do you guys think?
Anytime Yoel Romero steps into the octagon, he has my attention. The guy is, if you go back in time and you played Street Fighter, it's like watching Street Fighter in the octagon. The guy's amazing. In this fight, though, I have Brad Tavares just because Brad just has a more all-around game, and I think if he puts in a good game plan, he can really take advantage of some of Yoel's weaknesses. And even though he's an amazing wrestler and a fantastic striker and really exciting, I think he leaves himself open sometimes with his style, and a guy like Brad could capitalize on that. Duane?
I'm going to agree with you wholeheartedly, 100%. Brad Tavares, I think, and I've been touting this kid for a minute because I think he's one of the more underappreciated rising prospects that just doesn't get a lot of pop from the UFC. I mean, his last fight against Larkin was a co-main, and this is the main card fight on this big Fox show. But Tavares is about as technical a striker as you get at 85. Save for Anderson Silva. But he's a combination fighter. He gets in there, he finds his rhythm, and he makes it. It's not that he's been kind of nitpicked for not finishing fights, but it takes two to dance. And in this dropping knowledge I just did with Brian Stan that came out today on Bleacher Report, so check that out. Brian said it best that Tavares sets that tempo and he makes you pay for it. We saw Romero struggle against Derek Brunson having to fight at space, and then he flushed Brunson at the end. When he was desperate and had to fight like that in the third round. Tavares just doesn't break. I mean, the kid is sturdy, but also think the way Romero fights, we're going to see a different side of Brad Tavares in this fight. Somebody's going to come at him aggressive, and I think Tavares actually finishes this fight. So I'm taking Brad by TKO, either late second or early third.
Okay. Yeah, see, I think we're going to have fireworks regardless, and it is going to be a great stand-up battle. Romero is just absolutely crazy, and it's crazy to see him. He is such a good wrestler, and yet he basically chooses to be a striker. And we see he leaves himself so open with his striking that he even gets taken down by guys who in theory shouldn't take him down. So it's pretty crazy. The other thing is Tavares has very, very good takedown defense. So I think should Romero choose to come in very, very focused and not look to have a laugh in the octagon like against Derek Brunson, I think he could possibly wrestle Tavares to a decision. But yeah, just like yourself, I am picking Brad Tavares by TKO or KO. I'd say late, probably in the third though.
And just on Yoel, if there's anyone out there that displays the fact that pure wrestling and MMA wrestling is two completely different things, I think he's a prime example of that. A world-class wrestler, but as we've seen, not always, the most effective style for MMA wrestling.
I would definitely agree with that one. Dennis, what's your prediction for this fight?
So I've got Brad Tavares winning by decision.
Okay. Next. All right. Got to be different. We've got Donald Cerrone versus Edson Barboza. What do you guys think of this one?
Oh, I think put it this way: there's fights on that you put on paper and you're like, man, this is going to be explosive, and it turns out to be nothing. It turns out to be Gillard versus Jeremy Stevens in Indianapolis. But this fight, there's no humanly way that this thing cannot be explosive. I think, but here's the interesting thing, and Cowboy's kind of giving me a rough time about this when we've had a personal interaction about it, but it's true. Donald, if you put Donald Cerrone in a money fight where all that's on the line is his fight purse and a chance to get a bonus, this guy is lights out. He's never lost, but if it's a fight that has title implications or it's an eliminator, something weird happens to Donald Cerrone. This isn't the case, and I think Barboza, I really think what we're going to see in this, believe it or not, is Cerrone's going to use his wrestling. I think he's going to use it. He's going to spot use it. He has great wrestling working with Lester Bowling for a long, long time. I think he's going to kind of spot check use it, make Barboza think about it more. And then we've also seen Barboza rocked and put away. Varner put Barboza away. Danny Castillo certainly had him on the ropes in that fight just by using some crisp boxing. So I think it's going to be action-packed first round, but I think we got Donald Cerrone. I think Cerrone's going to TKO him in the second.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that one. And I think Donald Cerrone, he's got to fund all his crazy sports like his wakeboarding and motorcycling, rock climbing, bear wrestling, Cirque du Soleil, all that kind of stuff. So he wants to, I think, do 6 fights this year. And I think as far as, on that path of 6 fights, this is definitely a big step up in competition. But I agree with you. And I think the reason why I have Cerrone winning as a whole is just because he's a more complete fighter. And you're right, his grappling is very good. I mean, the dude has a lot. I don't know, he might even have more submission wins than knockouts, just because he rocks guys and then submits them. And I think that's what's going to happen in this fight. I think you're exactly right. He's going to grapple with him at the start, then he's going to transition to striking, and I think around the second, possibly third, he's going to rock Barboza with something. So my prediction is a submission that stems from essentially a knockdown.
Donald Cerrone sort of reminds me of me when I was trying to save up money for a car 5-6 years ago, and I try to work at the after-school care every morning, saving up every penny, to try and fund that life. But
there's a lot of similarities.
And then we also wear a cowboy hat all the time. You guys can't see it now. Yeah, it's a part of the Melburnian style that I'm trying to get into the culture. But I think that Duane, you brought up such an interesting point in Casper of Donald, using his wrestling. If he does, I'll actually be really happy to see that, because I think that sometimes, he does have to use, he's such a well-rounded fighter. He should use all of his skills, and just coming in and wanting to strike is, well, we've seen some setbacks in fights because he's done that. My prediction for this fight is going to be a bone-crunching KO in the first round, highlight reel, gets the bonus, and continues living his life, making it rain wherever he needs to make it rain.
All right, yeah, I think if anyone deserves that bonus, it would be Cowboy Cerrone. I want to see him wakeboarding into an old age. Coming up next, we've got Miesha Tate versus Liz Carmouche. This is interesting because both women have challenged Ronda for the title, and this one is sort of a fight where it gets them back in that title hunt. How do you guys see this one going?
With Miesha Tate, when she fought Ronda previously, I suppose a lot of people were a bit frustrated. Why are you going to the ground with Ronda? Why are you staying in that clinch, break out? You try and use your striking. A lot of people felt like it was a silly game plan going in there. I think Liz is a great person and a fantastic athlete. My only thing is I think Miesha's got a much more well-rounded game and great striking. Obviously, I suppose a lot of people criticize Miesha because she just puts her head down and, slings leather. But at the moment, that's how you win a fight in the women's division until Holly Holm gets in there. So I'm picking Miesha to win this one. How she's going to win it, I think she's going to win it in a unanimous decision over Liz, just by using her overall skills to dominate the fight. What do you reckon, Duane?
I'm going with Tate by decision as well. I think, Miesha Tate, and I was definitely one of the choir that was just befuddled by her trying to take Rousey down in that rematch, especially because she had a lot of success on her feet in that first fight, and she was certainly scoring when she tried in the second fight. I think what this comes down to is there's these two women kind of get this bantamweight title picture and trying to create what do you call it, contenders for Rousey. Makes it a really weird situation, because now we're looking at every fight like, man, is the winner going to face Ronda? I think if you take that away and you just look at these two women for their fighting skills, I think it's fairly one-sided. Miesha does everything that Liz can do, but she also strikes better. So I think there's a few. Liz, she could make it her fight by getting in the clinch and keeping it close quarters. But I think Miesha's just too well-rounded for her. I think Miesha's going to do her thing, and it's going to be a fairly one-sided fight, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think even though Ronda was the better fighter against Miesha, I think a lot of Miesha's game plan went out the window just due to her emotions. And I think with Liz, there isn't that emotional factor. They don't have beef. And I think you're right. Miesha, she's obviously a good wrestler, and I don't think Carmouche has the submission game to submit her. As we've seen, Miesha Tate's got pretty good submission defense. It just obviously it all fell apart against Ronda Rousey. So and of course then you factor in her striking. So I'd say Miesha Tate definitely by decision.
But what do you guys think about Liz Carmouche coming off a loss to Alexis Davis going into this fight? Obviously, Miesha Tate going off a loss to Ronda Rousey, but she had a lot of moments where she looked dominant, and obviously we spoke about her game plan. Do you think this shows or highlights a lack of talent in the women's division, having this being a co-main event? I suppose it's more about the name value than positioning in the top 10. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it definitely is more name value, and that's the thing. The women's division, they definitely have some, they've definitely got some strong women in there, but it is still a fairly new division, and it's still somewhat thin. So I think we're going to see, not necessarily see them, but at the moment it's almost like we're looking at a possible, a lot of series of rematches, because the top women really are separated by the lower tier.
I think it's a very similar situation to the way the men's flyweight division looks right now. You have a handful of guys that, the John Dodson, Benavidez. Benavidez just fought Demetrius Johnson, and he's realistically always one or two fights away from a title opportunity. If as long as DJ's not holding that title, I think they put Benavidez back in there. But yeah, I think the situation, I actually would like the dialogue to shift. If I could wave my magic wand and change the dialogue on things, I would like the dialogue to change from having to create. Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened. I got cut off a little bit there.
That's okay, not a problem. Yeah, go on. What were you saying?
Well, I was saying that, with Ronda Rousey, that realistically, even if Tate walks out and smokes Carmouche in the first 10 seconds, nobody wants to see that third fight. Just like, the way Benson Henderson lost Anthony Pettis. Benson Henderson could win 4 more fights, and it'd still be a hard sell to get him for a third fight with Pettis. So I think if we just kind of change the dialogue and just look at everything kind of Rousey in her own, her own stratosphere, there is some solid things going on there at the women's bantamweight. But look at Sarah Kaufman. I mean, I was thinking about that when I saw her fight this last fight on Wednesday. That Sarah Kaufman's a former Strikeforce champion, but she got smoked by Rousey in 50 seconds. So there's just not a lot of girls out there that can challenge Ronda at the time. But if you kind of take Ronda out of that equation and just kind of focus on some good fights, I think there are 5 or 6 really talented women in that 35-pound fold. But the disparage between them and the rest of 35 is pretty astounding. Just like the way the featherweight flyweight looks.
And you've kind of got that, Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos versus everybody else factor as well, where, the top women are really the top, and the bottom women, they're very much separated. I think we move on to the main event. What do you guys think?
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm ready. Do it, big boy.
That's it. So you got Travis Browne and you got Fabricio Verdum. I think this is a fairly easy one to predict. That's just me. What do you guys think?
Well, it's with heavyweights for me, in my predictions. I don't know if I jinx the fighters when I choose them, but I never seem to get a prediction right once in a while when a heavyweight fight does happen, and maybe it's because the power of their punches can change a fight with one punch. With this one though, Travis Browne, for me, is pretty much a lock against Fabricio Verdum, just based on his footwork, his athleticism, his great combinations, the way that he's looked previously. I just think he'll be one step ahead of Fabricio. Now, Fabricio has improved striking. The question for me will be, is Fabricio in the shape that he needs to be in a main event fight? We've seen some issues with Verdum's cardio in the past, and if he comes in great shape, in the best shape we've ever seen him, there could be a different outcome to this fight. But apart from that, I see Travis Browne keeping it on his feet and dominating with his superior striking. Duane?
I'm gonna say Travis Browne by knockout in the late first or early second. But I'm saying that because of this. I think the biggest mistake that's been made by Fabricio Verdum is the path he's chosen to travel. When he came over from Strikeforce, he looked better than ever against Roy Nelson. He looked great against Mike Russo, which, I don't know where Russo falls on the hierarchy of things, but After that, he took an extended layoff to do Ultimate Fighter in Brazil with Nogueira, and then he beat Nogueira, and then took another extended layoff, hoping this title picture shaped up where he would get the title shot. Those things, if you think about that time frame, he's had 4 fights in 3 years. And if you think about what Travis Browne has been doing over that time, it shapes up to make things look a little hairy going into Orlando, because, while Verdun was on the sidelines, Browne, completely, salted Gonzaga. He came through the fire against Overeem, took 3 minutes of an ass whooping, and then bounced back to knock out one of the best, strikers in the division. And then he completely beat the brakes off Josh Barnett. So here's what I think, though. I think the problem, the only way I see this going the other way is there's 2 factors. One, it's Fabricio Verdun. Everybody thought Fedor was going to walk through him too, and we all, history was written that night for sure. But we've also seen, like Browne gets a little overconfident at times, and injury or not, that Bigfoot fight was, that was Browne's overconfidence. That's what hurt him that night. So I think Browne, as long as he just sticks to doing what he does, and I saw him too in Albuquerque when I was down there, and the man is just a specimen for how big he is. I was watching him train with, he had wrestling practice and spar with Jon Jones. The guy moves like a 205er. So yeah, I think this is going to be Browne's showcase fight. I think if Verdun had been as active, I would say that it would almost be a toss-up. But that's why I mentioned my my drop in knowledge with Brian Stan. I really encourage people to go read that, because of the question that Brian answered about, do either of these guys pose a legitimate threat to Cain Velasquez? And most analysts and fighters usually try to play things PC a little bit, but Stan absolutely just rocked the house. And he's like, with what he said about neither of these guys, Cain Velasquez is a different animal. So as good as Browne and Verdun are, and it could be a great fight on Saturday, neither of these guys, in Stan's opinion, can hold up to Cain Velasquez and what he brings to the table. But I have Travis Browne finishing this fight in late first, early second.
Yeah, I think as far as the Cain Velasquez comparison, I think Cain Velasquez is like running Windows 9, and these other guys are on like Windows 98. So as far as that one goes. But yeah, look, as far as my prediction, I definitely picked Travis Browne. Here's the thing, Fabricio Verdun, he's looked good. He's looked good against, obviously, Roy Nelson. And Dennis, you mentioned his cardio and if he's ready and in shape. In the weigh-ins, he looked great. He looked like he was in good shape. But at the same time, I think that the shape that he's in now, I think it'll only get him in enough shape for a 3-rounder. As we've seen in the past, he does fade towards the end. And he looked good against Roy Nelson. But, Roy Nelson doesn't have the greatest cardio, so I don't think that factors in that much. Then he fought Mike Russo, and I wasn't that impressed with his performance. Yeah, it was a nice knockout, but again, Mike Russo, that was a really strange pairing. He was well out of the top 10. And again, that knockout I was really shocked by that. I didn't think Fabrizio really had it in him to knock him out that quickly. And then against Nogueira, I think Fabrizio looked terrible until he actually won. He looked bad when he was backing up. He didn't look good. And that's Nogueira. Then you take a guy like Travis Browne, who has this freaky athleticism, power, and if all goes well for him, he doesn't, bust an ACL or anything like that, then I think he's definitely got this one in the bag. Then you factor in the fact of what Overeem did to Travis Browne, and he still didn't quit, he still didn't get knocked out or anything. I don't see Fabrizio doing anything like that to him. So I think what it falls down to is there's no way Fabrizio gets this to the ground. There's just no way. Travis Browne, he has good takedown defense. He trains with Jon Jones. And Fabrizio, he's not exactly a wrestler. He doesn't have the greatest takedowns. So it's going to be a stand-up affair. And if it comes down to stand-up, having all those factors, I don't think Fabrizio is going to do much to Travis. And I think, like you said, Duane, it's going to come down to to Travis's overconfidence. But I will forever say he should have won that Bigfoot fight. And I think he definitely would have had he not, blown his knee or would have happened to his leg. So yeah, I'm picking Travis Browne, knockout in the second.
And just on that, me and Travis Browne have something in common. He tore his hamstring in the Bigfoot fight. I tore my hamstring playing football and played on. Just a lot of similarities between me and these fighters. But one of the Both of us lost. One of the things that I just wanted to mention about Verdum is, and this is, a lot of people may say, look, Fabrice, he lost against Junior Dos Santos. He has a lot of high-profile wins. Maybe, we should give him the benefit of the doubt. I can't give him the benefit of the doubt on this one. But what I will say is every time that I've seen him perform in the UFC, I've seen improvements in his game, in his striking game. In his overall game, the way he puts his game together. So who knows? We may see a improved Verdum in this fight, and that might make some kind of difference. But as Duane said, if Travers does get overconfident, if he does overthrow a punch, somehow end up on the ground, and somehow Verdum's in side control or catches his back, there could be a surprise victory for Verdum there. My prediction, of course, is going to be Browne by knockout around the third round.
So there you have it. We need to keep a score on these and come back next week and see who's got the most as far as these predictions go.
I'll tell you what. And if I win, I want his Melbourneian cowboy hat and his popped hamstring. Like, and if I lose, I'll send over something like overtly American, like high cholesterol or political indecision. So, we can make a game of this for sure. I'm down.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a problem, Duane. We'll call up the lawyers and they will draw up contracts. And we'll definitely meet to these terms and conditions.
I think a big tub of Vegemite for Duane might be a good thing to send over, and some Twinkies for us because we don't have them over here.
Yeah, and you can't defeat a Twinkie from what I've been told. Stupid customer. But
I don't know how customs would handle that, man. Like, I think you see me on Yahoo's like front line, like Indiana man, held by NSA for home security for shipping a box of Twinkies over, to Australia. I think that they'd have a probably easier time if it was cocaine.
I always thought that Twinkies will be the end of this world, not the Mayans or anyone else. It'll be Twinkies. But we've got Nate Marquardt coming up right after this. Before we let you go, obviously you can always follow Duane Finley at Bleacher Report or check him out on Twitter at Duane Finley MMA. He writes fantastic articles, and of course he's got the Fighting Life live blog. There's a ton of fighters, there's a ton of raw footage, a ton of interviews there, and that's always interesting. And of course on Bleacher Report, check out what Brian Stan had to say about these fights. Duane, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We'll definitely be speaking to you soon, and may the best man win in these fight predictions.
Hey, I will come back whenever you guys ask me to, talking fights with you two, with my mates down under. It's fantastic. Thanks, for the support and just home from the second leg of this road trip. I'm gonna be home for about 6 weeks, and then we're gonna give the East Coast some love. So I encourage everybody to follow along. Check out the travel blog, Bleacher Report. Fight magazine every month, So I got a ton of stuff. I'm all over the place, but just give me a shout on Twitter. I love talking fights.
Awesome. He's absolutely everywhere. Follow Duane, guys, and we'll be back with Nate Marquardt right after this.
That could be one of the greatest fighters that ever lived.
He's amazing. But Jon Jones' title may be in jeopardy. Glover Teixeira is a killer. Unbeaten now in 20 fights. He is a legit threat. Glover Teixeira. He's on such a different level. Jon Jones! That might be the greatest title fight in the history of the light heavyweight division. Wow!
Alright guys, our next guest is live here with us. He is a former Pancrase middleweight champion and a former Strikeforce welterweight champion. We have none other than Nate Marquardt. Nate, welcome to the show.
Thanks, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
It's great having you on the show, Nate, and thanks for coming on. Now, the big news coming out, obviously, is you'll be fighting in New Zealand against James Tahuna at the UFC Fight Night on June 28th. Can you tell us a little bit about that? This is a middleweight bout, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I'm moving back up to middleweight, and the guy I'm fighting, James Tahuna, is actually dropping down from 205. And this will be my first time going to New Zealand. I'm pretty excited. So
this one should be interesting. Obviously, James Tahuna, he was previously in the light heavyweight division. He fought guys like Glover Teixeira. Now, then there's yourself. You were in the middleweight in the UFC. Then you came down to welterweight. Now you're going back up to middleweight. What's the reason for the move back up in weight?
I just think the cut was starting to affect my performance in my fights, and for sure it was affecting my performance in my training. Just kind of lost a lot of my explosive power and things like that. So I just think it's the right move for me to move back. I had people telling me that I should drop down because it was going to be, I don't cut very much weight to make middleweight. So people thought I could make 170 and do better. But the problem was that it affected me, cutting my calories, affected my training, and just the little bit of muscle that I lost, ended up being muscle mass that I think, made me explosive. And so I just think it's the right move to move back.
Now, Nate, moving back to the middleweight division, is a great idea. Obviously, the last few fights in the UFC, you've had some difficult outcomes. Where are you at mentally right now in your MMA career? How are you feeling?
I think moving back to middleweight is going to make all the difference. I think I'm just I'm back in the gym. I've been back in the gym for a while now. I had a couple surgeries, and I just feel, very good. I feel very excited to be training and, to have a fight coming up. So I think I'm in a good place right now.
Now, I wanted to ask you, Nate, I know it's a little bit early at the moment, but obviously James Tahuna, you would consider him a striker, I guess. Yourself, you're more of a veteran. You're very well rounded. Going into James Tahuna, what's the game plan against him at the moment?
Honestly, I don't really have one. I think he looks pretty well rounded himself, I would say. Just judging off I've probably seen about 5 of his fights, and I haven't watched all the ones in the UFC yet, but I have them to watch, and I just I think there's a couple things that I need to make sure I'm changing as far as how I'm fighting, and make sure I'm not doing a couple things, and past that, I guess it's just fight how I fight, and look for my attacks and to be aggressive. So
Obviously, it's going to be a great fight. You've had some great wins previously in your career. Going back to the UFC, obviously you spent some time away from the UFC. What's it like being in the UFC now compared to your previous run? Is it the same? Is it similar? Or are there any little differences that you've noticed?
It feels the same to me, to be honest. And even when I left, it didn't feel much different. Just honestly, Strikeforce was owned by the same company and ran by a lot of the same people, so it didn't really feel different. It doesn't feel much different coming back, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that is going to be different, or at least that's what we're hearing, is obviously the UFC uniforms. They're talking about bringing a uniform, and a lot of people are talking about how it affects fighters and sponsors and things like that. What are your thoughts on the possibility of UFC bringing out a uniform, and do you think maybe makes the sport more professional?
I haven't really read anything about it. I just heard from one of my teammates not that long ago that they were considering that, and I definitely I don't like it. I think part of the cool thing about our sport is guys come out in their own shorts and whatever. A uniform to me, I guess, I don't know, just it's kind of like like NASCAR. Like if all the cars look the same, it would be kind of any kind of racing or whatever. If the cars look the same, they didn't have their sponsors on there, to me it'd look kind of funny. And so I mean, and then obviously, that's a huge a huge thing for the fighters. The fighters right now, I would say, most of them make half their money off of their sponsors. So right there, you're taking away half of their income, and so we'll see. I don't know all the details. So like I said, I haven't read anything about it, but just on the surface, hearing about it, it doesn't sound like something I'm excited about.
On that question, like, you've been in the UFC since 2005. Obviously, there's a huge boom. What are your thoughts on fighter pay? Do you think it's progressed enough where, it's a major sport internationally? Obviously, we're interviewing you from Australia, that, fighters are getting paid fairly, or do you think it's a little bit of an issue?
Well, it depends whose point of view you're looking from. For me, I'm thankful for what I have, and I feel like I'm blessed to be making a living and even being able to save money for the future, doing what I do. But if you compare it to other sports, obviously it's very, very lacking. And if you compare it to profits and things like that, I'm sure it's very lacking on the fighters' pay side. So yeah, but like I said, I think most of that's the thing. Fighters tend to be very happy and content with what they are blessed with, and so either way, I think I'm not going to focus on the fact that some people are talking about how the fighters aren't getting paid enough. Well, that may be the case, but at the same time, I'm not going to focus on that. I still see where I'm at right now as a blessing, so I don't feel like I'm being taken advantage of. So.
Now, I wanted to ask you, Nate, you're obviously moving back up to the middleweight division. Now, last time you were in the middleweight division, you were facing guys like Yushin Okami, Dan Miller, Husma Palhares, even Damian Maia and Wilson Gouveia and Martin Kampman. A lot of those guys have either retired or moved on to different weight classes. What are your thoughts on the middleweight division that is today, and how do you think it differs from previously when you competed?
Yeah, I guess, honestly, haven't really thought about it. I just, I feel like, you can sit there and look at every guy and kind of make those judgments or opinions about, where the division's at or whatever, but all that stuff really does not matter. It's all about who's in front of you right now. And right now I have a very tough guy, James Tahuna, very good, very, very athletic guy, and it's a big fight for me. And it's so that's all I'm really focused on.
Okay, just quickly, one more question about sort of the past is obviously someone who you previously faced is Anderson Silva. Now, as anybody, unless you're living under a rock, knows, obviously the former champ has been out for a while. As someone who previously faced him, what were your thoughts, on his leg injury, and do you think he'll be returning?
Yeah, well, I mean, at first, I felt horrible for him. That's one of the injuries that I just, it seems horrible. Like I'm used to seeing injuries and stuff, and I know that guys get certain injuries, and I don't even know an injury like that, how long it would take to recover from the surgery and all that. But it seems like a pretty bad injury to me, and I'm sure you could come back from it, but at this point, I'm not sure what Anderson would want. He's done so much in his career already, and he already lost to Chris Weidman twice in a row. So, I'm not really sure.
I wanted to ask you, do you think that's the evolution of the middleweight division? Do you think that Anderson's reigns is done? And what are your thoughts on Weidman in general? Obviously, you're in the middleweight division. How do you think you would stack up against the Chris Weidman, in hypothetical title fight?
No, wait. So what was the question?
I was just saying, with Weidman beating him, do you think that a lot of people are saying that both fights were flukes in their own different ways? Do you think there's a bit of controversy there, or do you think this really is the passing of the torch and, Weidman at the moment is the new head of the division? And I was going to ask you, how do you think you would stack up against Weidman in a possible future fight?
Well, shoot, I mean, Weidman proved himself against Anderson twice, He he did well in both fights. The first fight he took him down and controlled him, and the second fight he was doing well. And I remember, I believe the first time I saw Chris fight was when he fought Damian Maia on short notice, and he won a decision. And he looks great. He's a great fighter. He's a great wrestler. You can tell he works hard. I think he's a great fighter, and he definitely deserves to be where he's at right now. And how do I think I would do against him or anyone? I know I have God-given gifts that I believe I could beat anyone in the cage. So, but right now, all my attention and focus is on my next fight.
Nate, one of the things I wanted to ask you was, obviously your focus and attention is on the next fight, but are you still hungry to go for the title? Is that still a goal of yours to eventually make it up the ranks and fight for a UFC middleweight title?
Well, for sure, it's something, but like I said before, it's kind of like, it's pointless to look that far ahead in the future. Any fight past the fight that's in front of you is pointless. Not only pointless, it can be counterproductive. It can take your focus away from your current fight, and that. So obviously, I think the majority of fighters in the UFC, that's their goal, is to make it to the top and to win all their upcoming fights. But you can't you can't plan for that, or you can't think about that or focus on that kind of stuff. You just gotta day to day you're working on different techniques or whatever, different strengths and weaknesses, and all of that is generally directed at who you're fighting next and just generally improving.
Now, I wanted to ask you, Nate. You managed to win the Strikeforce welterweight title very very early in your run in Strikeforce. What was that like, and how did it feel compared to being in the UFC? Was it like a sort of a preview of things to come?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely it was awesome. I knew Tyron Woodley would be a very tough fighter, a very tough fight for me, and I could tell, he's an All-American wrestler, and he's very athletic. He was improving each fight I saw him in. He was improving rapidly, and so I definitely prepared as good as I could for that fight, and which I do every fight, but I knew that was going to be a good test for me, and I think he's proved himself coming back into the UFC now. He's done very well in that division. Just so I mean, it was. I'd say the victory in that fight was more. Of course, it's very cool to win a title and all that. But for me, that fight was just a victory, and beating Tyrone, and just all the hard training and effort and stuff I put into that fight, and so I had a lot of help. I had a lot of good training partners and coaches, as always, and I'm just very grateful for everything that I have.
Now, Nate, speaking of the evolution in MMA, one of the big hot topics at the moment has been TRT being made, illegal in MMA. Do you think that's fair that TRT is now illegal, and do you think that might raise some issues for fighters who legitimately need it?
Honestly, I mean, I think it's the way it was before was not fair. You know, it was kind of like, oh, some guys can do it, but some guys can't, and you know, it's just a very subjective. It was a very subjective rule and all these things, and, you know, depending on which commission you're in and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely think it was the right move to take it out. You know, I think guys that legitimately need it, you know, I don't know what to say about those guys. You know, I think it's too bad for them, but you know, I think there's a lot of other sports where they don't allow it as well. So I think it's, but like I said, I think it's just good, and you know, I'm sure some guys were taking advantage of the system, and you know, it's just better to do away with it.
Okay, now Nate, what we're going to do next is called the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. So it's a bit of fun. We're just going to fire off a bunch of questions and you got to answer them pretty quickly. It's kind of like a word association. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, Nate, you were in a music video, in a Jay-Z music video. Any plans on being in any music videos in the future?
Any what in the future?
Being in any music videos in the future?
No, it wasn't a Jay-Z video. It was MC Hammer, and
right.
yeah, I think he was like talking about Jay-Z in the thing, but no, I honestly don't see that. But you never know.
Okay, what's one movie you could watch over and over again without getting sick of?
Probably the kids' movies. I do that anyway because I got 2 and a 3-year-old, so probably like you know, the Pixar movies. I like those ones.
Speaking of movies, you're a part of Smash Hit Warrior, which is one of my favorite MMA movies. Tell us something about the shooting of that movie that we didn't know.
Oh, that you didn't know? Well, I guess the thing that surprised me the most was, to me, it was just amazing how many times they would shoot each scene. I mean, especially like the fight scenes, they would shoot, you know, you would shoot from one angle 3 times, and then they'd shoot it from another angle 3 times, and then they'd shoot it from another angle 3 times. And then you would do it with the stuntman. So rather than the actor, you'd switch, and there'd be the stuntman, and then you do certain moves like harder, and you'd do the same thing all the way through. And it was like, you know, it took up several different days shooting, and
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty amazing to me how much work goes into making a movie. It was eye-opening.
Now, tag team MMA is pretty popular in Russia. If you were to do tag team MMA, who would be a tag partner for that one?
You know, I think the trick in that is probably like, you know, getting quick finishes. So then if it's 5-on-5, then you shortly have 5-on-4 and then 5-on-3. So probably the guys who have the quickest finishes, guys like my retired training partner, Shane Carwin, I think would be a good teammate on something like that.
Well, if you're going to do 5-on-4 or 2-on-1, you'd probably want some of the guys from TUF Brazil. Just saying. What's one food that's hardest to stay away from when cutting weight?
One food? Well, I don't have to worry about that for this one. Moving back up to 85. So, no, I would say, probably potato chips because they're salty, they have the carbs, and yeah, they just taste excellent.
Yeah. You don't have to sell them to us, man. I'm gonna have to open a packet now. You might have to one of your sponsors might have to be an Australian chip company because you make it sound so delicious. But next question. Next question is, out of everybody who you fought, what's one rematch that you'd like before you finish out your career?
Rematch. Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. You know, I always thought it was Anderson Silva. Maybe we'll see. Maybe Chael Sonnen. I don't know.
That will be a good fight. That'd be a good fight to make. What's the strangest thing you've ever witnessed at a UFC after party?
A UFC after party?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I tend, you know, I've been married the whole time I've been in the UFC, so I probably haven't seen that stranger things. I probably leave before it gets to that point. But yeah. I mean, you see crazy stuff all the time, I guess, with being around fighters.
Nate, finish this sentence. People don't know that I.
People what?
People don't know that I.
I don't know. I think people don't know that I own a Subaru Impreza. They know about my. They knew about my '70s Chevelle because I put that on my website, but they didn't know I actually just drive around this little 4-cylinder car all the time.
Definitely didn't know that. All right, last question. How are you winning? How are you winning against James Tahuna at UFC Fight Night on June 28th?
Oh shoot! You know, God willing, I'm just gonna be able to go out there and give a good performance for everyone watching. You know, I really I think this is going to be a great fight. I think we're both very fast, athletic fighters, and you know, I want to put on a great show. And you know, honestly, I don't really care how I win. I just want to get that win.
And you have to come back on the show after the fight, and we'll have to have a chat about your thoughts on New Zealand. Obviously, one of our neighbours here in Australia, so that should be pretty exciting.
What's in Australia?
Well, New Zealand, they're like sort of one of our neighbours. They're not quite as good as Australia, but, you know, we think they're pretty all right. So you'll definitely have to come back on the show and give us the lowdown on your thoughts on New Zealand. Sort of like a travel show. You know, we might even do a thing where you just describe your favourite, you know, destinations in New Zealand.
All right, for sure.
All right, thank you so much for being on the show, Nate. We really appreciate it, and we'll have you on soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
And as our show comes to an end, what a great show. You know, Nate Marquardt, great guy, the big fight in New Zealand. That should be a really interesting one against Tahuna. Having Mike Winkeljohn on, you know, before the big Travis Browne fight, talking about Jon Jones. You know, it was really interesting. And Duane Finley, you know, always interesting to hear his opinion on what's happening in the world of MMA.
Yeah, I love chatting to Duane Finley. He's always a really interesting guy. And then Mike Winkeljohn, I mean, he had a lot of interesting things to say as far as Jon Jones, Travis Browne, a lot of the upcoming fights. So he's definitely another guy that we're going to have on in the future. And then, yeah, of course, Nate Marquardt, you know, one of the nicest guys we've ever had the privilege to speak to. Next week, we've got another big show coming up. We've got TJ Dillashaw. He's going to be talking to us about his upcoming fight at UFC 173 against Renan Barão. So that's going to be a big one. Make sure to catch that. Again, don't forget, guys, subscribe on YouTube, our new channel, Submission Radio AU. It's not the old channel, it's the brand new channel. All our future content will be on that one. Check us out at Twitter, Submission Radio Oz, AUS, and of course check us out on Facebook, Submission Radio Oz as well. So it's going to be a massive show next week. We're working on some other guests as well, and suffice it to say, you will be entertained.
That's right, guys. So keep an eye on all of our social media channels. We do release exclusive interviews midweek from time to time. We also have a lot of exciting content coming out, so don't miss out. Make sure you follow us, tweet us, like us, and subscribe to us, and so you don't miss out any of the special goodness that is Submission Radio Australia.
Just basically share us with us as much love as possible. If you feel like liking it, great. If you disagree with any of the other of any things we've said, throw us a comment. Tell us what you think, because we want to hear your thoughts. And if you do have any questions for TJ Dillashaw that you want answered, jump on our Twitter, let us know, or comment below, and we will do our best to ask him the questions that you want answered. Till then, I think it's about time for us to peace out. What do you think, Dennis?
That's right, guys. Enjoy the fights, and we'll catch you next week on another exciting episode of Submission Radio.